Hey, unicorn. Hold on. Can you see that dragon?
Yeah, can you see it?
Yeah. Let me check on YouTube. Okay. Okay, good. Oh, can you hear me too?
I can hear you, but can you hear yourself?
Testing. Yep. Okay, making sense. Good. I don't deal with any bad dream for today. Okay. So that's why I
Yeah.
double check it. But, let me turn it down. I'm watching something too. Actually, let me put my scary toy. Um, actually, I probably put it up here instead, so I can keep an eye on it. Cause I got two screen, you know. I just turn down the volume on this side. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Um, maybe I put. Wait, where's the chat? Oh well. Okay. Hi, my name is Germaniac Drago. Say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Um, today for the stream, I thought in brain evening, thought get back and brain power. I forgot what the game is. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue on what we were doing before we took a big break on the game. If it's too loud, just let me know. Where is my mouse? Oh, wait, what? Oh, okay. Let me turn down the volume so I won't blow your ears off. And plus so you can hear me too. Cause I talk so low. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Maybe turn down the water sound and the water tone. Eh, mm, the first step It's not too loud, right?
No, it's fine.
Okay. It's been a while since I've been back on that game. Hold on. I don't know where the shot on that one. So yeah, today, Dragon.
We're good.
Dragon, let me know if you cannot hear me, okay?
Alright.
The, the think it gets too loud sometimes. Um, Let me know in the comments what game you guys wanna see in each day if you want. Um, so I could talk to Dragon on what game that he can shoot from your comment.
Ow.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, Let me. I think I. Okay. Graphics general control. Crowd. Hmm. Hmm. Um. Uh. Control with the. Okay. Oop. There we go. What you at playing, Dragon?
Huh?
I mean, what are you playing?
Nothing at the moment.
No wonder you're so quiet.
I'm just watching YouTube.
Oh. And then get on it.
I'm just watching tips and tricks.
Wait, what?
Watching tips and tricks.
Oh. Chipmunk. Um. Um. There we go. We got that done. There we go. over there?
Yep, right there.
Yep.
And
Can you
Parents.
still hear me?
what if you encounter
Yep.
a parent
Okay.
that crosses the line and does something creepy that you would never expect? When we're children, we expect adults to be our leaders and to look out for us and to never bring us harm. But unfortunately, there just so happens to be a very select few of awful adults out there who take advantage of their position. Here's 8 scary stories of creepy encounters with parents who definitely cross the line. Let's begin. Number 1. This is something that I've remembered from when I was in primary school, which I found really creepy and caused me a great deal of anxiety.
There,
So here goes.
we got that one
When I
done.
was in primary school, I had a friend who was in the year below me. Her name was Polly. I think we were around 10 or 11 years old at the time, and we met at our after-school club and basically just became really good friends and spent a lot of time together in and out of school. Polly's parents were divorced, but she lived with her mom about 10 minutes away from me, so she would come to my house and I would go to hers. It wasn't until one day when Polly's dad picked her up from our after-school club when I started to feel uncomfortable. Her parents would take turns to pick her up. One evening, the after-school club was nearing closing time, and it was the two of us plus one other waiting to be picked up. Her dad arrived and Polly introduced me to him. He was tall, had curly ginger hair, and wore a suit and glasses. He looked pretty normal for the most part, but what I remember was that he just stared at me for about 3 minutes and nodded while Polly was rambling about me coming over for dinner next time, or something like that. There were a few occasions after that where her dad took us swimming but watched us from the benches upstairs, and I remember that whenever I happened to look up, he would be staring. Although it would be easy to say he was just keeping an eye on us, but honestly, this guy never even smiled. He just stared, and it was unnerving to say the least. There was another time when he took us to a barbecue, and whenever I would catch his eye, it's like he was trying to stare me down, and the whole thing just made me so uncomfortable. One evening when we were at our after-school club, I decided to ask Polly what her parents thought of me. I felt sick with anxiety when she told me she had asked her dad if I could sleep over, and he said something like, "Of course, she's a nice girl. She's very pretty." Polly had then said, "Do you fancy her, Dad?" And she said that her dad looked away and didn't answer. Whenever I think about this now, more than 10 years later, I think about how weird it would be for a child to ask their dad that kind of question. So I really don't know if she was making it up or not.
I'm just making
Either
sure
way,
that
after that incident happened, I tried to
win
distance
everything.
myself from her, but I would still notice her dad staring at me whenever he came to pick her up. I ignored it and eventually I ended up moving schools, but whenever I remember it, I still get the creeps from it. Number 2. Before I start off on this story, I just want to state that I changed names in this story and omitted them entirely when necessary. This happened this morning at about 10 a.m. Working full-time and as a full-time student leaves me with very little time under normal circumstances. Classes just ended not long ago and lots of folks have left my university to go back home for the holidays.
Let me know
I
what
work in a
thing.
coffee shop, so people going back home means that not only am I catching a break from school right now,
Like a
but work is
break,
usually super
Disney.
slow as well, and this has been beyond beneficial for my mental health. I usually reserve the use of marijuana for times when my UC is flaring up, or to gain back my appetite lost for the same reason, as I somehow ended up working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday this week, with the entire weekend off, and me recovering from a mild hangover from last night. I figured I could probably smoke before lunch, play some video, and be useful by the time lunch needs to be made. I roll one, slide the balcony door over, and smoke. This is fine, I tell myself. I deserve this after a long week. Some time to myself. I have nothing to do today, so I'm sure being high in the middle of day won't be an issue. I don't have to see anyone today. After patting myself
Don't
on the back
need
for a few
the
minutes more than needed,
ladder
I
for
slid
this
the door
one.
shut and huddled up in a blanket on the couch. I was the only one awake in my apartment this morning, and I could hear someone in the hallway. All of a sudden, there are 3 hurried knocks at my door, and I bolt up. Oh crap, did I forget someone was coming over to meet me? I think as I look through the peephole to see a middle-aged man with Homer Simpson hair, transition lenses, and a handful of gold-colored wrapped presents. He's also messing around on his phone when I look out, and I see the unit directly across the hall is getting Domino's, and the driver is standing in their doorway. Not feeling uneasy considering the audience, I open the door. This man then greets me and starts to walk in. I stand firm in the doorway, and once he realizes I'm not moving, he sticks his hand out. So I shake his hand back firm while staring him in the eye, still confused on what's going on. Keep in mind that though I was trying to look tough, I'm a fair-skinned blonde man with cracked lips. I'm in my PJs and my eyes are definitely red and glossy. I'm her father, he tells me. I could have sworn that I remember our roommate mentioning that her father is a tall black man, and this gentleman was not only white but probably standing at about 5 foot solid. Oh, you're Linda's father? I asked. It was very important that I said her name. Let me go let her know you're here. Hold on, I said, and I made my way down the hallway to knock on her bedroom door, next to my fiance and I's shared room. I go and knock and say that there's a visitor for her, and by the time I knock, he is right behind me, still messing around with his phone, all the while holding those presents in his hands. Now I have to do the awkward slide by him in my own apartment. I figured I'd leave them be. He seemed beyond excited to be here to visit his daughter, so I made my way back to the living room. Before I could even lie down again, I hear, "No, I'm Jane's father," from down the hall. This guy isn't here for my roommate. He's either lost or actively trying to see our apartment for some reason, I thought to myself. I bolt right up and made my way down the hallway, half tripping over things since I'm sitting at about an 8 at this point. As I see him going for the doorknob to my bedroom where my fiance is sleeping at, I got a little loud, which is usually not in my character. However, I'm high on my last day off and there's a stranger possessing far too many red flags about to walk in on the love of my life, and I then told him that he's in the wrong unit. As I tell him this, he must have been dialing on his phone while talking to my roommate, because he pulls his phone to his face and says, "I'm here, baby," and tries to ignore me. I repeated myself a little louder and he asked where she is. "Unit 14, I'll show you the door," I replied. The pizza guy's still there in the doorway when I send him out, and Terry was asking his phone which floor she's
cleaning
on.
up there.
That's when I
What
realized that this
McCall?
entire thing happened within the time span of about 2 minutes. The pizza guy and I share a look of solidarity as I lock my door. My roommate came out and we chatted about how freaking weird it was, and she laughed since somehow I handled it really well. I logged into PlayStation to let the story out to one of my mates over a few matches of Overwatch. Here's where things get interesting. So it's around 2 p.m. and my fiance wakes up. We both had a long night. I only wound up having about a drink or two thanks to my UC and IBS limiting me from going all out. But my fiance went buck wild before bed and was nursing a bad hangover. I was sober by this point and mostly over the whole ordeal, having had a nap since then, and it almost felt like it was a dream. I mentioned offhand that a man came by and she says that it kind of woke her up. She remembered hearing someone familiar in the apartment. I then explained the whole story and she asked me what he looked like. This could purely be coincidental, but I guess about a month ago while I was at work and she was between classes, a man fitting the description right down to the transition lenses came beating on the door asking her to open up. Unfortunately, I forgot the exact details of the encounter, and she's sleeping right next to me now, so I can't ask and wake her up. But he seems to keep thinking our unit is someone else's, or he's just trying to get a viewing of our fully furnished unit without the tour guide. Whenever I think about it, it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. I mostly just wanted to get this off of my chest. But Terry, let's not meet again, or you just might be getting a better view of our apartment than you like. Number 3. Back when I was 7 to 9 years old, my mom had just started to let me walk to school all by myself, as I only had to walk up the road around 2 corners and then I was there. It was basically the same route whether I walked left or walked right from where my house was. I normally walked left, which
I
followed
keep
the main
going
road past
to
our
that
house, but I
though.
eventually decided to
I
walk
know
right after a few
between
weeks,
that.
as that's where our grade was supposed to play at play and lunchtimes. The right route led to one of my
That
friends'
is
houses, where I would spend 5 to 10
so
minutes most
difficult.
mornings before we would walk down the small hill to
Especially
school
if it's
together.
like
Some
so
important
tiny.
information. I would wait downstairs with his
You
mom
cannot
while he and his
see
little
it,
brother got
and I
ready for
just
school,
fell.
which usually took them around 5 to 10
Right.
minutes. After about 2 or 3 months, his mom started acting really weird towards me. She would stand closer and closer to me each time we met, which at first, it doesn't sound so weird. She eventually got me to sit in their living room and talk to her about myself, but very personal details like if my mom and dad leave me alone, if I ever thought about having sexual relations yet, if I masturbated, etc. These things were confusing for me because I was overly naive, so I always answered, I don't know, I never really thought about it. After a while, she would start to touch on my thighs and then would ask me if I needed a nap, needed to sleep, etc.
There we go.
She
Well,
also kept saying things like,
yeah, be
my
careful
husband will
not
be
to do
home
that.
soon. Sometimes once and sometimes a few times. The only person who knows about this to date is my partner, and I never told my parents or anybody else. For all I knew, I probably shouldn't tell anybody because she was an adult. Adults are superior. They know best and they can do what they want. This is what my young mind believed when I was younger, and considering I've known her for a few months before all of this happened, I didn't think anything of it before I grew up and had some worse experiences. I've kept this bagged up for a while now, and it feels nice to get it off my chest. I really hope that she never pulled that kind of crap on any other children besides myself. It's truly sickening that an adult could take advantage of a child like that. I really hope that I never encounter her again. Number 4. My mother's first husband, Jim, was a jerk.
There.
I was only 10 years old when they met at a church. She was the new in-town single mom, and he was the boyishly handsome drummer of the worship band at the church.
Mistake
And they struck up
every
a relationship.
small
He wasn't
detail.
exactly what I would call her type, but I think she liked him because he was a sweet, laid-back, good guy. He had a steady job, he was good at fixing things, and he at least made the effort to have a relationship with me. On top of that, he was born and raised in the small town we lived in and was friends or family to just about everyone. All in all, he was good husband material. Then came the troubles. You see, Jim was an alcoholic. When he started courting my mom, the drinking wasn't an issue. He had been upfront with her about his status, but he didn't make a habit of drinking, and made it clear that it wasn't a part of his life anymore. That changed after the wedding. Apparently, the stresses of married life are simply too much for any sober man to bear. I've met many alcoholics in my life, most of them related to me, and it's a special sort of dread that washes over you as a child when you suddenly realize you're stuck with another one. I know alcoholics are not inherently bad people, but Jim was a lousy alcoholic. This easygoing nice guy would turn into a raging jerk after just a few PBRs. And whenever he decided to drink, he made an event out of it. Usually he would storm out of the house after an argument with my mom and tear off into the night, not to be heard from again for days. He would eventually be discovered on the other side of town at his mother's house, half naked and trashed by the fish pond, working his way through a case of cheap beer and riding into town on a lawnmower for more. Upon his return, he would be the picture of remorse, call himself scum, and beg for forgiveness. Not just with us, but the good Lord above. That was the thing that always bothered me about Jim, how he always felt the need to bring God into it. If we were having a family meeting specifically to discuss his behavior, he would insist in leading a prayer first. Every time he needed to explain himself, he mentioned conversing with God on the matter beforehand. In Jim's eyes, God wasn't a savior or a beacon of hope or even a crutch. God was a defense attorney. No matter what kind of stuff Jim got himself into, God would be on his side to pull him out. More than that though, and this is what I truly believe, he only seemed to talk about God's mercy and forgiveness when in reality he needed that for my mother and I. As if bringing up God's love would soften our hearts to his struggle, as if suddenly worked for a while, but the novelty wore off soon enough. Every now and then he would go to AA meetings and he would come home insisting that he was enlightened, reborn, or on the road to being clean. but never attended frequently enough to get results. The marriage lasted 7 tense years, punctuated with stresses
Did I
and benders
want me
every few
to
months, followed by more empty
play
promises.
more of this?
My mom tried to play the
Let me know
supportive
in
Christian wife
comment.
for a long time before finally giving up and switching to full-on resentment. Their fights were never physical, but they were ugly, and sometimes they got so loud enough that I was worried someone would throw a punch. Finally, my mother ended things with him.
I don't know if you guys could hear me. Can you? Making sure. Hold up, unicorn.
The divorce was quick and quiet. By then, I think they had just grown tired of each other and were relieved to part ways. She took the house, he took the Chevy Trailblazer, and that was that. My mom recovered nearly overnight and was happy to start her life again. After a few months after the divorce, we heard that Jim had gotten remarried. Cindy was a friend of ours from church, and we had been close for years, though it was no secret to anyone that she had always had a crush on Jim. Cindy had never been married before, barely even dated, and she landed her dream guy. Or so she thought. We couldn't have been happier for her. For Jim's part, my mother and I decided to be optimistic. Maybe he'd really cleaned up his act if he could hook up with such a good, sweet woman as Cindy. A few years pass. I'm well into college by this point, and my mom is living with her new man in a different city. It's been at least a year since we've been back to our small town or spoken to anyone there. One day I get a message from a friend from high school. Did you hear about Jim? I asked her to go on, already rolling my eyes at what it could be. As she started telling me what happened, my smugness turned to horror. Jim and Cindy had been having issues for a while, reportedly over money. The incident started when Cindy went to Jim's trailer. Apparently she had recently moved out and was returning to pick up some things. Cindy's 22-year-old niece came along with her to help out. Jim had claimed he was going into rehab, so they were surprised to walk in and see him sitting there drinking on the couch. The couple began arguing, leading to the women leaving the house and driving away. Drunk and furious, Jim jumped into his truck and took off after them at full speed. He caught up to them and slammed into Cindy's car, knocking it so hard that it flipped and rolled off the road. Realizing what he had just done, Jim backed away and sped off in the other direction to hide. Cindy was in critical condition for days before she was finally declared stable. Unfortunately, though, her niece died instantly. Jim was found hiding out in some farmland a few hours after the incidents and was swiftly charged with murder, DUI, and fleeing the scene, among other things. The city's golden boy had just sunk himself into a whole lot of crap, and not even D.A. Christ could get him out of this one. This story is awful and upsetting for a lot of reasons, not the least of which being two innocent women were so viciously attacked by this drunken idiot, and that they all happened to be people that I personally knew. But the one thing that still chills me is the car Cindy was driving, a Chevy Trailblazer. The very same Chevy Trailblazer that Jim got in the divorce. My mom's old car. The car that I learned to drive in. I can only imagine how fast he was going to hit them hard enough to flip it with his little pickup truck, and how angry he must have been to have not even hesitated. I do sometimes wonder how many times my mother and I escaped a similar fate. I'm just glad he's behind bars now and can never hurt anyone ever again. Number 5. So a few years back, during my senior year of high school, my stepdad made a very poor decision. His decision has caused a lot of pain and suffering for my mom and I, and we're both still in counseling for PTSD and anxiety disorders. For a little context, my parents got divorced when I was 7 years old. I'm also a female if it matters to anyone. I was used to them each dating other people, and I was actually very happy for my mom when she told me she met somebody new. That is, until I met her. As soon as I met this guy, Don, I had a horrible feeling in my gut. Don was originally from Florida, and he moved to Kentucky right before he met my mom, leaving behind his ex-wife and son. He was a weirdo in every sense of the word, always trying to start an argument over petty topics or walked around shirtless with his strange nipple rings out while my friends were over. Although he was weird, he was never threatening or abusive at all towards me or my mom. That is until one night right before my mom's birthday. I remember the night clearly. It was my best friend's birthday, and I was waiting for her to come pick me up to go to dinner. My mom and Don also had plans to go out and watch the UK-Florida basketball game. As an only child, my mom has always been very protective over me, so she wanted to wait until I left with my friend before she left with Don. This, for whatever reason, really pissed Don off, and he stormed out of the house without her. I left shortly after. I returned around 4 or 5 hours later, and Don had not come home yet. My mom acted very weird and nervous when I asked about it, and just ushered me off to go to sleep. As I was sleeping, I was woken up by my mom screaming my name. Obviously disoriented, I groped around for my phone, thinking I'd overslept and was late for school. When I checked the time, it was nearly midnight. My mom screamed my name again and told me to shut the door and call 911. This is pretty much when things hit the fan. I started freaking out and jumped up to slam my door and lock it. Right as I did this, 3 gunshots flew through my bedroom door, narrowly missing me. I grabbed my phone and jumped to the other side of the bed and lied on the ground, hoping to avoid any more bullets. I barely had time to get out my address and inform them that someone was trying
That
to
one
kill me.
was a little
My mom
difficult.
screamed one last time before 2 more gunshots rang out. Everything fell silent, and I had a
So
horrible
did
feeling
how
that
far
someone had
did
just
you
murdered my
get
mom.
to
I got
on
up to the
Disney
door when I heard
Dragon?
the person begin to throw themselves against my door in an attempt to break it.
You're
All
fine.
that was running through my mind at the time was getting to my mom and staying alive.
If I
Eventually, he
break
broke my door down,
Disney
and I was horrified
tomorrow,
to see that it was my stepdad.
I have it
Was
now,
almost over as he
so
grabbed me by the collar
I
of my
can play
shirt
it
and put the barrel
anytime.
of the gun up to my head. I screamed
So
in
I
shock
could
as he said,
play
"This
it
will do
tomorrow.
Is this what
Is
you
that
wanted?"
okay, Dragon?
At this point, a lot of the details get hazy,
Yep.
as I had a ridiculous amount of adrenaline
Um,
pumping through me, but I somehow managed to back him up and push him down onto my bed. I used both of my hands to hold his hand with the gun away from me.
if
We
you guys
struggled like this
want
for a
the
while until my mom came in.
something
She had
out
a gunshot wound
other
to the
than
stomach
them
and laid across the gun
or
while telling me to run.
Disney,
I hysterically ran out my front
with
door
the
and up to the
Disney
street
net
to my neighbors.
tomorrow,
I scared
just
them
let
half
me
to death,
know.
but I was able to redial 911 and tell them what exactly was happening. As I was at my neighbor's, my mom was still in my room with my stepdad. She says this is when she became very weak from blood loss and rolled off of him onto the ground. She asked why he was doing this, and
That's
he simply put the gun
96,
in his mouth.
so
She took this opportunity to run out the front
Excuse
door
me.
right into the arms of a police officer. In the end, the police ended up having a standoff with Don as he barricaded himself inside. He made the mistake of pointing a gun at them and
so
they
we
took
almost
the
done with
standoff,
it.
which was a small amount of
Big old
cocaine,
thing.
and then arrested him. He is currently serving
Whoa,
25
baby.
years in prison, and to this day will give no reason as to why he decided to do
Less
this to us.
talking and more
In all honesty, I don't
on
really care. My mom
the
and I lived
trading.
through it and have grown much closer because of it.
So let's
We
move
actually got matching
the
tattoos that read, "Strength comes from
thing over
having to
here.
survive." Number 6. So, my stepdad used to molest me. When my mom found out, she threw him out and turned him into the cops, and we moved to a different house, but in the same small suburb as before. He was acquitted in court despite being guilty, but I'm sure he was told to stay the heck away from me, if not by the law, then by my mom. One day, maybe a half year after the whole court drama, I was 13 or 14 and had gotten my first boyfriend. He didn't really know about my past because we just met, and I didn't want to be that damaged girl. So this particular day, my mom was at work. I'm sitting in my new house with my new boyfriend. It was his first visit to my house, and it was going well. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, and I run out to open it. It was the suburbs, so I wasn't too worried about who it might have been. It turned out to be my ex-stepdad just standing there smiling. I know now that I should have just closed the door, locked it, and called someone, but I'm scared of him to the point where I'm certain that he'll get in if he wants to. He had that crazy stare that
So
someone
we
who's trying
almost
to
done
poke
with
you
the
to do
big
anything.
old thing.
He had this big duffel bag in his hands, and I
It's
think all kinds of other
97 if you guys
I thought
see.
it was stuff he brought to kill me, but he just handed me the bag and says, "I found some of you in your mom's magazines. I thought you'd like to have them back." On the inside, I'm freaking the heck out because I knew straight away that he somehow knew that my mom wasn't home. He would never have shown up if she was, but I take the bag and say something like, "Thanks, bye," and start closing the door. He puts his foot in so I can't close it and kind of pushes it open again, looks at me and says something like, "So what are you doing?" and starts smiling that creepy pedo smile again. Again, I should have just yelled for my boyfriend sitting in the living room, but I feel like if I drag him into all of that drama, he'll totally dump me, and I'm too embarrassed. So instead, I go in my own kind of combat mode, move in closer to my stepdad and say, "I'm with my boyfriend," and point to my boyfriend's shoes in the hallway, and then he gets a new look on his face. I don't think I'd ever seen it before, but as soon as I saw it, I knew I messed up some freaky plan he had. It's like something inside of him just shut down and he stopped having that creepy smile on his face. I don't even remember what he said afterwards, but I remember he just kind of left awkwardly.
Cockpit
When I opened the
door.
bag, it was just filled with old magazines.
It's
but they were
90
all hidden.
something.
I called my mom at her work
Gonna
straight away
take
and told her he'd stop by.
That
Shortly after, she came home and called him up and yelled at him for like an hour. I never saw or heard from him ever again, but I can't really shake the thought of what he would have done to me had I not told him that my boyfriend was there. Like I said before, that look on his face just showed that he had some kind of creepy plan for me. And when I told him my boyfriend was home with me, it seemed to have messed up his plans. Whatever the case, I'm just glad I've never seen him since. And hopefully it'll stay that way. Number 7. When I was 14, I went to school about 30 miles from home. So understandably, I didn't see my school friends very often on the weekends. I was so excited when I finally got the chance to stay over at my friend's house, as she was much more popular than I was.
There we
I
go.
thought this might be my chance to cement myself in the
If you
community
guys
at school.
see any dirt,
My friend
just
had
let
always
me
been
know.
popular with the boys, mostly because
In
she
the
was very
comments.
flirtatious and what I would call a tease today. It was only as an adult that this behavior made more sense. So I get to my friend's house and I meet her parents. I should preface
Let me
this by
check
saying
that
that my
thing.
parents had not met her parents when they agreed to stay
landing.
over. This is not something that I'll allow with my own children. Anyway, in regards to her stepdad, I immediately feel that uneasy feeling you get when you meet someone dangerous. I feel like most girls and most women are equipped with some sort of sixth sense that helps them determine which men mean them harm. But as I said, popularity is at the forefront of my mind, so I push aside my feelings and try to enjoy my time with my friend. I can already tell they have an interesting relationship though, as they seem far more intimate than my father would ever be with me. I can't totally explain it other than to say that it's now clear that he had already been sexually abusing my friend, and for some time now. The most terrifying moment came while my friend was out of the room for a few minutes. This guy wasted no time in coming up to me, telling me how beautiful I was and how he could tell I was a fresh virgin.
Let's see
I was
what
freaking
one
petrified. He then tells me
Go
that
to
he would very
landing.
much like to be the one to take my virginity, that he has done it before and that the girls have enjoyed it and that I would enjoy it too. I can't remember exactly what I said as it's been 18 years now, but I'm sure I mumbled something about not being interested and my friend miraculously came back in the room. You could tell by her face that she knew something was going on and she seemed so apologetic, as if it were somehow her fault. I get so angry when I think about her trying to make the situation okay for me. I spent the rest of the night on hyper guard, though he never made another advance. He basically stayed away
Let's
from us.
go in that
Maybe
one.
because he suddenly realized that I might tell my parents, but he needn't worry about that. For all the times my parents told me as a young child to tell them if anyone ever touched me, they never really talked to me as a young adult. I stuffed this incident down inside and never told anyone until I met my husband. I moved up in the ranks of the cool people, so I guess I got what I wanted in the end. But I can't stand to think of this incident too much or else I get really mad. I also worry that no matter how much I tell my son to tell me if something bad happens to him, like myself, he might not. But hopefully something like that will never happen. One can only pray and hope. Number 8. So my mom was married to this guy for 6 years before she finally had enough of his BS. I think I was around 9 when this happened, so my brother was 4 or 5 at this point. He was a pretty cool guy up until shortly after they got married. He was a serious control freak and a bully. He picked on me and my brother, so to speak, and treated his own son like he could do no wrong for the most part. So I was probably about 16 when we were driving home from something. Somehow the conversation got on the subject of stripping. I think it's because he was talking about one of my mom's best friends who used to strip. While we're in the car on the way home, it was just me and him, and we get home and we're walking up the stairs to our apartment. And he turns around and tells me that he'd be cool with me being a stripper because they make pretty good money. Another
There
time,
we
I
go.
guess this isn't necessarily as creepy. He got blacked out drunk one night, and the next morning my mom and I noticed that his truck wasn't parked the same way it had been the night before. I was 16 years old going on 17. They found some chick's panties in it, so this dude had the audacity to blame me. 1, I don't drive a stick.
You know
2,
you
I
could
don't have
talk,
a
right,
license.
Draco?
I would have had someone come
Yep.
get me. 3, we were on
So
the
quiet
second
right
floor
now.
and slept out in the living room that night.
Just watching
And 4,
YouTube.
why the heck would I not put my underwear back on? Needless to say, their relationship didn't last much longer. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said previously, I know I haven't uploaded a whole lot this week, but that was mainly just because of the holidays. Next week, I'll be back on the normal 4 videos a week upload schedule, so be on the lookout for that. Once again, before we bring this video to a close, let's go ahead and shout out all of my amazing $5 patrons. Lisa, Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Carrie B, Celeste S, Courtney T, Ellie S, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jennifer M, Jess, Jonathan C, Catherine M,
You okay
Harry
there?
F, Matthew B,
Nope.
Michael G,
What
Random
do you do?
Randy, Steph
I told you
L,
I'm watching YouTube.
Tammy
Oh.
S, and Terry H. Thank all of you guys so
Hi.
much, as well as my $3 patrons that are also featured on screen. I truly appreciate all of your guys' love and support. It means more than you know. And if you'd like to be a patron and join these awesome people, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thanks everyone, and have a good one. And remember
Okay.
to always stay hungry.
Feed me. Um. Yeah.
I was 11 years old. At the time, I was living in an apartment situated on a street with an ongoing construction. Needless to say, they often tapped into the electrical supply and the power fluctuated quite a bit. Therefore, the streetlights often served no real purpose, especially in the winters, when evening dawned on us with pitch black darkness. That is irrelevant, so keep it in mind. From what I remember, it was a weekend. I was supposed to spend at my friend's house for an 11-year-old me. This was an exciting prospect, having been loaded with schoolwork the entire week. I was to spend what I believed to be Friday night sleeping over and spend the entirety of Saturday at her bungalow, to return home that very evening. What made it even better was the fact that her parents had an event that they could not avoid, and therefore trusted us to stay home alone in their house for the eternity of the 6 hours they would be gone for. Back then, the idea of spending a whole night alone with my friend was great. No interference, and a whole 6 hours of games and movies on their huge TV. As it turns out, my friend had other ideas. I arrived at her house just short of 8 p.m. It was already pretty dark out, and her parents had waited for me to arrive before telling us about emergency contact,
Wee.
dinner, and such. They also reminded us to get their 4-year-old Labrador inside as the weather was acting up. And
Yes,
there
sir.
was a few loose pamphlets
Tiny one,
out
I
when
cannot
playing.
see.
This is also an important fact to be noted. After they left, we watched a few cartoons, had dinner, and were chilling in her living room.
Hello, no, Dirt.
That's when my friend Sid had the ingenious
Come on
idea
out,
of
where you
exploring a
at?
fenced plot of land a few hundred meters down the street that she resided on.
Hey, no, Daddy,
There was
Daddy,
construction
Daddy.
happening in there, so what little of that
Where
was
are
in
you?
shambles. It was overgrown with plants and weeds. Got the dog inside, leashed
No,
it to its
Daddy,
large
Daddy.
chain that allowed it to roam within reason, got the keys and left the house
Aye,
in a
aye.
short 10-minute trip.
Uh.
At this point, it was about 10 p.m.
Hey,
In retrospect, this is where we still had a chance to avoid this particular encounter, but being the curious and daring 11-year-olds we were, we ventured anyways. Rather uneventfully, we arrived and set
you
the
guys
thing over the
don't
2 meter
need
wall.
that.
Luckily for us, the wall was broken, enough in places to make good holds to us carry us over. Once inside, Sid suggested that we sit a few meters away from each other for as long as we could still one of us gets scared to do so. We faced each other and walked backwards till there was just enough light to see the general silhouette of each other. After what seemed to me like a good 10 minutes, I saw Sid hunched form rise and start to walk towards me. She seemed to be walking rather faster and in a haphazard manner, jumping over rocks and such at a daring pace, even getting cut by some thorns in the process. She came up to me, and just as I was about to laugh and call her out on being scared, she told me to get up because she needed to go feed Shaggy. I remember being really confused because her parents had already filled his bowl with food, and he had this water thing which he could operate in case he was thirsty. But I saw her face, and let me just say, I have never ever seen her this pale. She looked like she had seen a ghost, so without asking questions, I said okay, but we made our way back over the wall, albeit in a tense manner and rather quickly. The moment my feet touched the ground, I felt Sid grab my arm and straight up just start sprinting down the street. To put things into perspective, I had a bruise from the way she grasped it for 2 weeks straight, so we ran like hell, was chasing us. Arrived at her house and went in through her front yard fence gate, towering metal
No.
gate without bars, and she told me to unlock
Oh,
the front door
no,
while
whoa.
she dead-bolted the middle gate's various locks into the ground, the 2 gates that touched each other. At this point, I was starting to panic, but we got into the house and Sid then proceeded to run around the house locking and closing all possible windows and doors as well as pulling the curtains shut. I was very confused as to why she was doing this, and so was her dog who stood there and followed her around while she did so. After about 10 minutes, she came back into the ground floor living room and with a very scared expression explained to me that the reason she did all that because while we were sitting apart, she happened to glance away from to a few meters to my right to see another human silhouette crouching in the bushes. She thought she was imagining it until it moved closer to where I was sitting and seemed to be unaware that my friend was
Which
watching me.
one?
She did not want to startle me
one?
or the person, and so she made up having to feed her dog as an excuse to get out of there without alerting the person still crouching there. After hearing this, I was quite shaken and we hugged for a few minutes, deciding not to tell our parents as they had very much warned us to not go out of her compound. We did not want this to be the last of our time alone together having fun, and so we peeked out the window into the street which seemed to be empty as far as we could see and proceeded to put it behind us as excitement took over our minds once again.
Let's go get
I would
the
love to say that was the end of it,
ladder.
but what happens next has stuck with me
So
till
we
date,
could
and I hold the fear of that situation
bring
from that
that
point onward. To give you an idea of the layout of her compound, her house was surrounded on 2 sides by a lawn, and the lawn was then surrounded by a wall that was 2.5 meters high. The wall had one entrance, which were the tall metal gates I talked about previously. The house itself had windows all around the perimeter, as well as
Don't
two
need
potential entrances.
do more of
The
that.
first being the front door, while the second being a door to the small attached space next to the house, which was made of a see-through metal like the kind which metal fences are made of, but stronger. This space had a metal door with a lock only accessible from the inside, as well as a door which was on the wall that this space was attached to inside the space. However, this door had a deadbolt on and was made of light wood. This is also of importance. So an hour or so after the incident, we were upstairs in her air-conditioned room playing games on her computer and talking about whatever it is 11-year-olds talk about. When we heard the dog bark downstairs, it was growling and seemed to bark at random intervals. Keep in mind that her dog was a friendly Labrador who rarely even growled or barked aggressively. My friend went to get the dog upstairs to her room, and after she returned, she informed me that the dog was standing near the front door growling at it, and that it took her quite a bit of effort to get him upstairs as he kept trying to go back there. We were really confused as this was unusual for him to do, and thinking that a stray dog may have caught his attention, we decided to go into the balcony attached to her room that gave us a view onto the front lawn and a part of the street directly in front of the house. Instead of seeing what we assumed would be a stray dog, a cat, we looked down to see a person standing very still in her lawn and in front of her front door. In the limited light, we could make out heavy layers of muddy-looking clothing and a head full of hair that looked very matted. The dog was with us in the balcony and was whining to be let outside. We crouched in her balcony, and right as we were about to discuss what we should do, we heard what sounded like the front door rattling as if someone was trying to open it with the handle. We creeped back downstairs only to realize that this person had now moved onto the window next to the door and was starting to open that. The realization hit that he was trying to find an entrance into the house by going around the perimeter. Just as we were about to creep back upstairs, my friend grabbed me again and in a hushed tone told me that she had forgotten to lock the attached space door in her hurry. We both looked at each other and paled as we realized that it would gain the intruder easy access into the house as the inner door had nothing but a deadbolt.
Alright.
At this point, we heard the windows
There we
rattling
go.
behind the house, nearly 3/4 of the way back to the front again. The attached space door was a few meters away from the front door, and we were lucky that he had chosen to go around the other side.
Now let's check
She told
which
me to
one
wait by
needs
the inner
to
door
be
with the dog while she went
clean.
outside and bolted the metal door. She then informed me to close the door as soon as she returned, and that if she was caught, to let the dog outside and to close the inner door as discreetly as possible as to not give myself away. We were both terrified, and since we had no time to argue about it, I stood guard at the inner door while she went out to the outer door, fumbled with the lock, and returned
The
to
water
sleep,
tank needs to be
partially running
clean.
as quietly as she could. We closed the inner door, and
Down
just then we
here.
heard the outer door rattle harshly. Had she not gone there, and then there was a big chance that we would have no choice but to hide in her house had he found his way in. After he tried opening all doors and windows, which took a while as he was doing it, quiet, intently, and forcefully. We found our way back upstairs and went back into her balcony to see if he had gone away, as we had stood still near the foot of her stairs for a while listening for any further activity. As we looked down, we saw him once again standing in her front lawn. However, this time, we could see his head was tilted back, and it felt like he was looking right at us. However, we knew that it was far too dark for him to be able to spot us along with closing all the windows and such shut. We had proceeded to kill the lights in her room as well as drawn the curtains as to not let her little bedside lamp light escape the blinds. He then started giggling in the quiet of the night and then proceeded to go down on all of our fours, crawling around the lawn in front of the house. How his laughter grew, in retrospect, we should have called the authorities at this point. But being the terrified 11-year-olds we were, we did not want to get into trouble for not even being able to follow simple instructions. He did this for nearly half an hour, only to stand up once again facing the street and then climbing on top of the kennel and the corner up onto the top of the wall and jumping down. We still stood in her balcony
There we
waiting
go.
to see if he would return, but an hour or so passed where he didn't. And that was the last we saw of him the entirety of the night, till at around 2 a.m. her parents returned. The next morning, they were confused as to why all the doors and windows were closed on such a pleasant night, and why there was mud on the front doorknob. We said we just wanted to play in the dark inside the house, lying about the actuality of the situation, and to this day, I do not think the man has been caught. So, creepy front lawn guy, let's not meet.
There we go. I'm making sure, triple making
been good
sure
friends with
that
one of my
it's
cousins.
clean.
The same age I am. The two of us were not quite insparable, but we always did get along very well together. And we often found together both in school, as we'd always wound up in the same class together throughout elementary school and outside of it. When we were 12 and in 6th grade, I was hanging out with Cole on a Friday afternoon around the part of May, and we psyched at the start of the weekend. We wound up at his house since he didn't live too far from me, and at one point my mom called to say that our grandpa was in the hospital. While the issue with our grandpa wasn't expected to be life-threatening, he was being kept at a hospital overnight for observation, and both my parents
Okay,
and
that's
Cole were
the
planning on staying. With him and
one
Grandma
and
at
the
the hospital,
second one.
since my mom and her sister were the two of their siblings who lived close by. I was told that I was given the okay to stay at Cole's house for the night, with Cole's 15-year-old brother Hunter being in charge, while our parents were out. This was fine by us. I get along well enough with Hunter, and he was never the bossy older brother slash cousin that some of my other friends said that they had to put up with. We ordered our pizza and enjoyed goofing off as boys that age tend to do. At around 9 or so, there was
Let's
a
move
knock
it
at the
at
front door,
there.
and Cole went to answer it. I was a bit curious as to who it could be at this time of the night, and so I watched from a ways back. The door were two older guys. They said that they were with the city and that they were investigating reports about the water pressure supposedly too bad in the neighborhood. They asked Cole if his parents were home, and when Cole said that they were unavailable at the moment, which we were told to say to strangers if our parents weren't home, the guys started asking a bunch of questions about how the water pressure was in the house and if they could come inside to check. Hunter came over at that point and politely told the guys that the water pressure was fine and perhaps they should go move on to check on another home in the neighborhood. The guys seemed reluctant to leave, but turned and walked away after Hunter started closing the door. After the door was shut, we looked at each other and shrugged, but didn't think too
Try
much
and
of
find
it
the
after
ones
that,
that
and we started back
that-
goofing off. Eventually, we decided to go to bed. Cole and Hunter shared a bedroom, and we all agreed that I'd sleep in there with them. Rather than me hitting the sack on the couch or something like that we could talk while we fell asleep. Hunter grabbed his sleeping bag out of their camping supplies drawer. When we got into their bedroom, they stripped down to their briefs, and I remember Cole mentioned to me once a while back that they had started sleeping in just their underwear. Since I had it originally planned on staying the night, I hadn't brought anything with me from home as far as overnight stuff. And since I wasn't in the mood to sleep in my clothes, I stripped down to my briefs as well. So I felt a little bit embarrassed, even though we were all guys there and I knew they weren't saying anything to be judgmental. They climbed into their beds and I quickly crawled into the sleeping bag. After talking for a while about random stuff, we eventually fell asleep. Early the next morning, I got up because I had to pee. So I quietly got
You
out of the
guys see
sleeping bag
dirt?
and went
Let
and
me
did my
know.
business in the bathroom. On my way back to the bedroom, I heard something in the family room, which was on the opposite side end of the house from the bedrooms and particular bathroom I was using. I didn't pay too much attention to it, at the time thinking it must be just either Cole or Hunter, until I got back into the bedroom and realized that both of them were still in there, in the bedroom. Trying not to panic, I woke them up and told them quietly that I thought someone was in the house. They quietly followed me, and the moment we walked into the family room, we saw the two guys from that night before in there, and it was rather clear that they were robbing the place. One of them started moving towards us, as he pulled out a wicked-looking knife. One of them started
I
moving towards him.
cannot see it.
Pulled
Can
out
you
a
see it?
wicked-looking knife. The three of us pumping braces the front door, somehow managed to get it unlocked and opened, and we fled outside. As luck, we have it.
Must be tiny.
By that particular moment, we quickly flagged him down and told him that two guys were in the house. The cop called us for backup, and within a couple of minutes, several other cop cars were there, and they proceeded to enter the house. And after some searching, they caught the two guys. It was figured out that the two guys had entered from a window in the laundry room that had been latched, and had probably targeted that house because, while it wasn't empty, they probably realized that there were no adults there and figured that if we discovered them, we could be more easily dealt with than adults. To add insult to injury, while we were waiting outside while the cops searched the house, both to get the two guys and to make sure that there was no one else with them, some of the neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. This included some kids who went to the same school as Cole and me, including a few who were in our 6th grade class. It was during that time that the three of us had realized that we never got the chance to get dressed. So just like in the stereotypic nightmare, we had to stand outside in full view of everyone in just our briefs, for what seemed like an eternity before being allowed back inside. When we went back to school on Monday, Cole and I had to put up with more than a bit of snickering, stares, and ribbing for the next few weeks until school ended for the summer. This happened in summer of 2008, I think. I was at a sleepover birthday party at my friend's house. That is going to require some explanation. I live in rural western Pennsylvania. All you need to know about that side of the state is that if you aren't living in Pittsburgh and Erie, you're probably living in Boyltown that went across decades years ago. Oh, and you're probably isolated in a forest somewhere, too. My family did okay in spite of the economically depressed area we lived in. Now, my friend had money. His family weren't Wall Street investors or anything, but in a town like mine, it was noticeable. He had a big house, a huge yard, a tree house, trampoline, big screen TVs everywhere, and every single video console. You might think I was only friends with this kid because of the stuff he had. Honestly, that isn't true. He's probably in the top 5 of nicest people I've ever met. His family is also amazing. He took me in for a while when my mom was in the hospital once. I still kept in touch with them. So, rich guy, good guy, etc. He had a lot of friends. His birthday parties were pretty legendary among kids in our town. Usually, they involved one of those closed canopy tents outside, with movie projectors inside along with a soft-serve ice cream machine and slushie machine. The party was in 2008. I think my friend was turning 14 and I was 13. It was a little more low-key. There were a few less people than normal, and there weren't any tents and projectors. We played video games for the first part of the night, and then started to play flashlight tag when it got dark. I know that the rules to flashlight tag can vary on depending on who's playing.
There we go.
My friends and I used to play it like group hide and seek. The hiders would go hide in the dark, sometimes alone and sometimes together, but it was a great spot. The seekers got the flashlights and also some cool walkie-talkies. As I said before, the yard we played in was huge, and there were a lot of places to hide. The first hour or so was pretty uneventful. We mostly hid around the tree houses, as well as climbing some of the trees inside the yard itself. The only thing we had to worry about was when a cop car drove by. Obviously, we weren't doing anything illegal, but we just didn't want to explain why we were sneaking around the house at 11 o'clock at night with flashlights. My friend's yard ends in some pretty thick woods. My own house was just a couple miles down the road, with some wooded areas around it as well, but not like this. After you leave my friend's backyard, there's about 15 to 20 miles of wilderness before the next town. He does have neighbors on one side, and all of this is going to become important in a little bit. On this particular time, I was one of the seekers. My group and I was waiting in the house for the other groups to hide. We were mostly drinking slushies and messing around. He had just came out of the house and started our search when we heard a lot of yelling. Suddenly, the entire other group came rushing back to the house. We went inside, and my group, really confused at this point, followed them in. It took a few minutes for everyone to calm down and explain what was happening. Their story went like this. That round, they had all decided to hide back in the woods since we hadn't been back there yet. They had gone a number of paces inside, but were still inside of the house. Looking farther inside the woods, they caught sight of a figure at the edge of their vision. It took them a little while to figure out why they were looking at them.
Okay.
They thought it might have been a tree or a deer or something, but they kept on focusing on it. When they were sure that the shape was a human, they started yelling and sprinted back to the house. When everyone was finally inside and mostly settled down,
You okay
I
there?
was freaking out along with some of the other boys. A few
Oh.
of my people in my group, including my friend who was throwing the party, were skeptical. They were pretty sure that the other group was trying to scare us. In fact, my friend was almost angry about it. He was about to march off to the woods to check out the situation himself. They stopped him and said that they should only go back to Cheek as a group or to wake up their parents who were asleep upstairs. Most of the people who hadn't gone into the woods actually found this to be pretty fun in a weird way. It was like being a thriller movie. Plus, we were in a low-crime neighborhood, and there weren't enough of us that one unarmed person shouldn't have bothered us. Even if it was a hoax, it would have been a fun scare. Came up with
If
a plan
you
to
guys see
investigate.
that, let me
One of
know.
the guys decided to go back into the woods with flashlights and walkie-talkies. They also planned to bring my friend's dog, but that didn't work out. The dog was a golden retriever, collie mix, and was the furthest thing from the guard dog, unless you feared being licked to death. He also got most of the exercise by fetching tennis ball into the big yard, so he was not used to being on a leash. I waited at the house with another scaredy cat kid with the other walkie-talkie, ready to wake up my friend's parents or to call the cops. I wasn't taking the situation very well, but didn't really show it. I seem pretty calm on the outside, when I'm usually a nervous wreck on the inside. I at least attempted to calm the other scaredy cat down. After a few minutes and some excited chatter on the walkie-talkie, the investigators returned in a similar state as the original first group.
There
There was a lot of shouting, and it took a few minutes to get the story straight. This is what happened to them. They had gone to the edge of the woods like the original first group had done. It took a few minutes of searching since the figure had been spotted in the thicker bush that wasn't easy to reach. One of the kids had swung his flashlight around until he caught sight of something before yelling and running back
Let's
to the
put
house.
this on the
Some of the other
side.
boys who had gone the same
Good.
glimpse
Can I
inside
go
the
to there?
being behaved similarly. They confirmed that they had seen a person. He was mostly obscured behind a small tree. The features that they could make out of that brief moment were that he was a male who was on the taller side with longish hair. One of the boys who had seen him thought he might be wearing some light flannel. Apparently, he had made no move to approach them and had just cocked his head out a little to stare them down from behind the tree. It was at this point that my friend's mom finally came downstairs after all the commotion. We explained the situation to her. Afterwards, she
Alright,
locked all
let's
the
do
doors
this.
and told us to stay inside and to tell her if we saw anything else. She explained that the part of the woods we were going through into was probably not their land anyway. They just had the closest house to it. Needless to say, I did not sleep well that night. We were situated on air mattresses in my friend's game room. A really frank kid actually took to sleeping underneath one just before sunrise. I finally drifted off for a few hours. When I came to, everyone else was awake and eating pancakes on the patio. My friend's mom was with them. She had checked the woods that morning and had not seen anything amiss. We were all a little on edge, but things were pretty normal besides that when my parents came to pick me up. I was reminded of the fact that I only lived 2 miles from my friend's house. It was a walk that took 10 minutes or less. Even at home, I started to sleep for a while. I just kept thinking of how easy it would be for the man in the woods to show up in my yard. Fast forward a couple weeks later, and I'm playing video games at my friend's house again. I bring up the subject, and he was very dismissive of it. It was strange, but he was really pretty short with it.
See what one
It was like he wanted to drop it. None of his
I
behavior
need
fit
to
his
clean.
personality at all. He did come up with a short explanation, though. Apparently, one of his neighbors had a son a few years older than us. He was tall with long hair. My friend explained that he could be a jerk and was pretty weird. The way he said weird may have indicated some mental condition. My friend's explanation was that this kid had seen us playing and hid in the woods to scare us. That did make me feel a little bit better at first. It did seem reasonable on the surface. There was a good chance that actually what happened. However, there are a few things that don't sit right with me. In my experience, when someone is trying to scare you, there's a haha gotcha moment at the end. Like most people want to reveal, the whole thing is good natured or they just want to show you how dumb you is for nothing. Back when we had our sleepovers in tents, one of my friend's older brothers would rustle the outside before popping in to see if it scared us. Both of the brothers moved out. This person in the woods did nothing like that. He may have just been trying to scare us and went on the whole thing, wherein his only pleasure was knowing that he had scared us for life. Where if this kid really didn't have problems, maybe he just didn't understand how pranks typically went. His explanation also brought back an old memory of mine. I had been going to my friend's house for close to 10 years at that point. In one of the early years, I remember playing a game with my friend, and one of his neighbors who lived across the street, both my friend and the neighbor had crabapple trees in their yards. We played a game of basically dodgeball with moldy apples thrown across the road. The game ended when the neighbor, who was a few years older, chucked a crayon apple at my friend's head as hard as he could. It absolutely nailed my friend and he was on the ground crying. I brought him inside where his parents asked me what was wrong. I told him about the game and the neighborhood kid when he had finished crying, parents scolded him and said that they warned him about this. They just said that the neighborhood kid was not nice. For the record, he did not have long hair, but this was a number of years prior to the incident. Now I don't know if this was the neighbor that my friend pinned the blame on, which brings me to other disturbing things. My friend never gave me the suspect's name, even when I pressed him on it. More unsettling was the fact that my friend was not among the kids who had actually seen the guy directly. This was just his explanation for what happened. I don't think my friend was actually trying to cover him. I think he was just worried that I wouldn't want to come to his house anymore if I didn't feel safe. This was the last time I had a sleepover at my friend's house. This wasn't really because of the incident, but because we were entering high school and overnight parties started meaning something else entirely. My friend's explanation does seem plausible, and that makes a pretty creepy story on its own. The alternatives are even more frightening. I don't even want to think about what kind of guys go stalk teenagers in the woods in the middle of the night. So whether you were a creepy neighbor or a creepy mystery person, let's not know.
Real quick before we begin, if you enjoyed the last video's celebratory 1 million subscriber music video, aptly titled Thanks a Million, it's now available on all major music streaming services, as well as the solo music video over on my new YouTube channel called Let's Read Clips, which features daily 8 to 10 minute videos with one story per video, getting you right into the action. You can find the links down in the description or pinned comment. And thank you all again so much.
I kinda know what that one.
I had spent months planning my graduation party. As a newly minted college graduate, I wanted to celebrate my achievements with my friends and family. I had also invited a few online friends, people I had connected with through various social media platforms and chat rooms. One of them in particular piqued my interest. His name is Mike, and we had been chatting for months, bonding over our shared love for books and movies. I understand the fear of meeting people online, but after really doing my research, I was confident that not only Mike was real, but he was a genuine person. The day of the party finally arrived, and my excitement was just palpable. As the guests began to trickle in, I eagerly scanned the crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of Mike. We had never met in person, but we had exchanged pictures and video chatted countless times, so I had a general idea of what he looked like. When I spotted him standing at the refreshment table, I felt my heart race. He looked even more like a person with a charming smile and deep-set eyes. I approached him and we struck up a conversation, immediately hitting it off. I I was relieved and excited that Mike was exactly the Mike that I had imagined. As the party went on, Mike and I spent more and more time together. He was witty and engaging, and I found myself drawn to him. However, as the evening progressed, I began to notice subtle inconsistencies in his stories. He would mention details that didn't align with what he had previously told me, and he seemed to dodge certain questions about his past. It seemed fishy, but I was trying to chalk it up to just my imagination, I guess. The more I observed him, the more I realized that there was just something off about his behavior. He seemed overly interested in my friends, asking probing questions about their lives and relationships. At times, his gaze would linger on them for a little too long, making them physically uncomfortable. My unease grew as the night wore on, and I decided to confront him about the inconsistencies in his stories. He brushed off my concerns, assuring me that he was just nervous and had misspoken. I wanted to believe him, but this nagging voice in the back of my mind told me that something wasn't right. I used to have a horrible tendency to always believe people and be naive, and give them the benefit of the doubt, even when alarm bells were blaring. I exhausted myself to the bathroom and pulled out my phone, doing a quick search for his name and any information I could find about him. And believe it or not, to my horror, I discovered that Mike wasn't who he claimed to be. The man I had been chatting with online was, in fact, a convicted stalker who had served time for harassing and terrorizing multiple women. All the information you could ever want was right there, including his haunting mugshot. And now this guy...
I forgot what that was.
How I didn't think to look this stuff up before was just another indication to me of how naive I am about the world. And panic set in as I realized the danger I had unknowingly invited into my life. I knew I had to get him out of my house and away from my friends. I called the police, and they advised me to keep him occupied until they arrived. Even though Mike wasn't doing anything illegal, I don't think, they figured it would be safe to check in and make sure the party was safe. I returned to the party, trying to maintain my composure as I re-engaged Mike. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, I saw the lights of the police cars outside my window. As soon as Mike saw the lights, his expression instantly changed. With intense anger in his eyes, he looked at me and said, "What are they doing here?" And he became erratic. Without even knowing why the police were called, he assumed it was for him, and he started to shout, "I can't believe you do this. You know me. You think I'd do this to you?" I tried to play stupid since I assumed that there was no way he could even know that it was me who called the authorities. The officers entered the house and swiftly tried to apprehend Mike, who at this point was just starting to go completely off the rails, yelling things. He started to pick up chairs and end tables and throw them around the room. He looked at me and shouted in my face, "You're going to be sorry." As the cops finally got a hold of him, he started to calm down. They were speaking to him in a quiet and calm voice, so low that I couldn't hear what they were saying. I could only see Mike panting like he had just run a marathon, and he looked genuinely shocked by the turn of events. As they led this guy out of the house, not in handcuffs, he stared at me with a mixture of confusion and anger. I couldn't help but shudder, realizing how close I had come to potentially falling prey to his sinister intentions. The officers, apparently this is how Mike engaged his last victim, are looking for protection via social media and various other social platforms. What was scary about Mike was that the man you would see in the pictures and videos was the man you got. There was no catfishing, no tricks, and no ruses. This sociopath would invite himself into your circles and break down the walls from the inside. A lot of monsters hide behind the internet, but not Mike. He used the internet as a jumping pad to enter your real life. The party ended on a somber note, I guess, but my friends and family rallied around me, offering their support and comfort. The experience was a sobering reminder of the dangers that can lurk online, hidden behind charming smiles and carefully crafted plans.
Where's that one?
I vowed to be more cautious in the future, grateful that I had managed to escape whatever harmful situation I could have fell into.
Oh,
Video.
sorry.
Videos.
Took place 8
Why is it
years
hot?
ago, shortly before I graduated. I
Huh?
remember that time very vividly.
So why is it hot?
It came with closing one
Well,
chapter and starting another.
Remember?
My friends and I rented a house during our last 2 years of school, and
I love
to
summer.
head back home for graduation. All of my friends that lived in the house,
I don't.
besides I, went to high school with me, so I knew that
It's like
we would
Olaf.
have close contact in our hometown after graduation. Anyway,
Wait,
In
wait.
summer.
just to
You,
check out our
you
campus
played it
ceremony.
way too much.
I think we had to go to the bookstore and
What?
wait in line to pick up everything we needed. I was last in line and could see that my friends were finishing up, but I had yet to be helped. I was then waved over by a young guy who looked like he may have been a freshman volunteer.
Yeah, I watch Frozen too much.
When I walked over, he said something to me, but the tone was so low that I had to say, "What?" a few times for him to speak up. He then apologized,
What you say?
cleared his throat, and
I said I watch Frozen too much.
I gave
Well
him my
done.
name and stood there as he sorted through the list looking for my name.
Alright, I'll be back when it's restroom.
When he came back to the boxes and pulled out my cap, gown, and some paperwork and handed it to me.
I said run to the restroom. I didn't say hurt yourself.
Because he had been avoiding eye contact this entire time. As I said thank you and was ready to leave, I heard him mumble something again under his breath. "Excuse me?" he said. And this time, after clearing his throat, he looked right at me and said, "Do you know what you're wearing under it?" His stare was blank. I didn't know what to say. I think he sensed that I was taken aback, and he quickly put his head back down and shuffled paperwork and said, "My sister wore one of my grandmother's dresses under hers. Sorry, I was just making conversation. Thank you." And walked away. I slowly walked away and saw my friends laughing in the hallway, and I caught up to them. One of my friends, Stacy, asked if I was okay, and she said I looked like I was ready to throw up. I told her about my strange encounter, and she laughed and said she felt bad for the poor nerd. She said he would probably think about it all day and wish that he had said anything else. And that somehow made me feel better and quickly pushed it out of my mind. A few nights later, we were having a small send-off party at our house. It was a small group of maybe 15 or so people, and I wanted to see some of my extended friends. I wasn't sure if I would or wouldn't stay in contact with once we officially graduated and went back to our hometowns. The night was fun and mostly uneventful. And then, at about 1:30 a.m., we got a knock at the front door. I
There
think
we
the
go.
4 of us who heard it all huddled in the living room to try and see if we could see who it was on the front porch.
And then
We
it
checked out all the
they
adjacent windows and
need
couldn't see
one
anything.
more time.
We decided to leave the chain lock attached and crack the door just in case someone was there. But when we cracked the door, no one was there. Most went back to the bedrooms, but Stacy and I stayed in the living room on the couch and turned the TV on. After we chatted for a little bit, I could feel that I was getting tired again, so I decided to head to my room, which was just off the living room. After about 20 minutes in bed, I felt like I was hearing a scratching sound, and I couldn't figure out what it was, but I thought maybe something under my bed was scratching the floor when I moved, or something hanging on the wall was moving and scraping. I'm not sure what persuaded me to do what I did next, but I got up and locked the bedroom window, which I noticed for the first time was unlocked. After
Yay!
holding off for another 20 minutes, I got up out of bed
Did
to see if I could find the source of the
The
annoyance
first
that's in front
I
of me.
need your
As soon as I
assistance
got
at
out
the
of bed, there was a huge thud on
mountain.
my bedroom window, which scared the absolute crap out of me.
Oh, cool.
I ran quickly to the window to see if I could see anyone or anything.
Where am I going?
I didn't see anything, but after that, the scratching noises stopped. I stayed awake for most of the night after that.
Time
I
lapse.
wasn't able to get comfortable
Thank you.
and didn't really feel very tired.
Next
after the
we're
first
doing
night at the window. 2
Third
days later,
Finder.
we were getting ready on the
Someone
morning of graduation.
way
Some of us
too
had a
much
drink or two to celebrate.
time
Mostly we were packing
an
some
egg
stuff in our
on
car so
the
we could head home after the
ear.
ceremony.
thing
I was doing my hair when I
Very
heard another loud knock at the
bump
door.
board
I was running a little late.
my
and didn't
magnificent
answer, even though I was close to
phone
the door. I
bowl
remember hearing someone answer
bold
the door and then call my
with
name. They
protected
said it's for you in a weird
mode
voice.
file.
I hopped out of my room
Don't
excited
ask me
to
why.
meet my family on their way to the venue for graduation.
As
What I
fair
saw stopped me dead in my
as
tracks at the
noble
door.
a
It was the
mayor
with my cap
at
and gown on campus.
the
The
town
music.
ever
I
seen.
don't really remember exactly how the conversation conversation went, so I'm just gonna phrase, but I asked, "Why are you here?" To which he replied in a soft voice that
and
I
I'm your,
stood up. Annoyed
and
and
I'm
overly
sure
I said,
you
"Hey,
appreciate
where I live."
security
He
and
responds,
a
"Oh, yeah,
premium right
party, remember?"
now, so
Surprisingly more
I'm
confronted.
afraid I won't be
Yeah, we had a
allowing you.
You weren't here. He then looked up at me and said,
Okay,
"Why? I didn't say I was inside."
too much to read.
I just yelled right in his face and said if he didn't leave right away, I was gonna call the cops. My friends heard me yelling and came rushing to the door, but it was too late.
Wow,
I had already slammed it and
you are not kidding at
I
all.
told my friends what had happened and acted like I was fine and it didn't faze me. But inside, it really put a damper on the day. I couldn't quite focus
Start,
and enjoy the
start with
situation.
this
I
side,
felt as though I was going through the motions.
and then I'll do the
For some, this story was
tiny,
insane and scary.
tiny thing.
It's one of the most unsettling events in my entire life. I often think about what would have happened if I didn't lock my windows that night. The positive thing is that after that day, I was back home and
Look where we
Like-
at.
college town, I think once or twice.
I'm back there to the bell.
So you're not taking a She's trying
Oh.
to take a nap.
Aw. Do they have their bathroom today?
Yeah, or
Aw. They're gonna get their banana. They're gonna get banana later.
what do you think?
Yay! Peachy's gonna get their banana later.
With
High school was
Turn
finally
on
over, and my friends and I couldn't wait to celebrate
Huh?
our newfound independence.
the
We would take a
job.
weekend trip to a nearby lake house, the summer, and leave our high school days behind us. We set off immediately
That'd be
after the
crazy.
graduation ceremony, our cars
What?
packed with swimsuits, snacks, and infectious excitement. The sun shone really brightly as we cruised down the highway, the wind whipping through our hair as we sang
You're gonna sing the rest of it.
songs. Party in the USA by Miley
Go
Cyrus
40.
played 2 or 3 or maybe even 12
Here?
times. But as we drove, I couldn't help but notice a car
Extra long walk.
just following us.
We're not kidding.
Behind us since we left the school and no longer had stayed.
It was extra long.
At first, I thought it was kind of funny that it had been following
Who?
us for so long, but once we got to the part
I got new water gun.
is when I really started to get uncomfortable.
That's cool.
I mentioned it to my friend, but
It's
they
the
took me a second,
extra long one.
assuring me that it was probably just some coincidence.
I think it's much
Sometimes that I look back,
better than the other one
unsettling
we used.
looking men who both sat just completely motionless in the car. They looked to be older, but that's about all I could make out from where I was sitting. My friends were probably right. I was always the one who always worried in high school, and I was a little bit paranoid. We arrived at the lake house in the late afternoon, the sun casting a golden glow across the water. We quickly unpacked and headed down to the shore, eager to enjoy the last few hours of sunlight. I'd almost forgotten about the car that had followed us. My worries washed away by the sound of just laughter and the gentle lapping of the waves. As the sun began to set, we gathered around the bonfire, roasting and just reminiscing about our high school adventures. The evening was perfect, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the incredible friends that surrounded me.
Because no, I don't play
2 men, standing at the edge of the
Harry
lake,
Potter
their
anymore.
faces seemingly obscured.
Harry Potter.
Skip the beat.
I mean the newer one.
The same men that I may have seen
And she plays the old one, but not the new one.
Yeah,
be watching us.
the new one. too. I tried it.
Felt sick.
It
I quietly
it was
opened my
too
eyes
hard for me.
and we collectively decided to head
But at least I tried it right.
As we
Yep.
left, I couldn't shake the feeling that the men were still watching us. Their intentions
Let us know
were
how
still
far you
very
got it.
disturbing. We locked
Like
the
if
door
you're near
and were replaced by the
the
soft
end or
silence.
something.
We tried to brush off our fears and enjoy the rest of the night with the knowledge that we were
I don't know what my next game gonna be when I buy. Maybe that game or something. I don't know yet.
Gasping and jumping at every little sound I heard. It was truly one of the longest nights of my entire life. The following
That was a good
But I
game.
do
like a creepy man.
got a lot of
We stuck together.
game on my wish list.
Silent.
like
found ourselves
I
laughing
forgot how much.
at each other's company.
A lot probably.
Men returned,
The price that
and this
get
time we got closer to the lake house.
maybe 100 and
Terrified and
something.
unsure what to do, we decided to just call the police and report the situation.
So
Unfortunately, this was easier said
yeah,
than
I've
done.
been looking for
None of us had any
a lot of
service.
games to
The
play.
Wi-Fi was pretty shoddy there. Eventually, one of us was able to get through.
To keep me busy,
Inside and assured us
you
that
know.
they'd send a patrol car to check on us. Hours later.
Yeah.
I said hours later.
Um,
An officer arrived and spoke to the men who, at this point, were basically
'cause I cannot
lost.
leave now.
The cops instantly told us to calm down
But,
as they approached the men.
Yeah,
They claimed they were simply camping in the area and meant us no harm.
my dad
The officer warned
said
us
I might go out tomorrow.
assuring us
So Dragon,
worried about.
I don't know,
Officer
maybe
said,
sometime
if you don't feel like being
in the
alone,
morning.
then don't camp.
So
Huh?
I'll probably
Officers
be
gave assurances
back
and so
at
rude as
like
well.
12 or
Didn't
so.
share the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. We spent the remainder of
I'm
our
going
day
out
in
to the mall
carefree excitement of our graduation
I'm
tomorrow.
going out too.
fear.
Mall of
Shortly
Georgia.
after 2 a.m., we thought that we could hear floorboards creaking just outside
So,
the house.
I'm going out too.
To the porch
yeah,
of
but
the
what
house,
time?
those two men
Like in the morning
on the
time.
back porch, right outside the store next
Um,
door. They just stared in
Maybe that lady wants to go out.
or saying anything at first.
But
These sort of expressions
I hope we don't go out at 3. I hope at the same time that it'd be weird to go. What if we don't stay?
It might be morning, it might be afternoon, or wherever she decides she wants to go out.
Ran out.
Yeah,
One of my friends was screaming, and the rest of us were basically in tears. The men didn't even react to our reactions. They just kept saying the same line repeatedly about the ketchup. The worst part of this nightmare was when he grabbed the door and opened it, saying, "I just need some ketchup, guys. Come on, open the door." Finally, one of the friends got
Call it
police
down.
frantically
What?
shouted urgency.
What are you talking about, dude?
The two men
Government
thankfully
Steve,
never returned.
Governor
Closed the car
Stephen
in our driveway for the rest of the evening.
is
As we packed up our
he never
home, I couldn't help but
seen
feel
such
sense of
a what?
the weekend trip had been marred by the unsettling presence of the
What are you
two
talking about, dude?
experience far behind me.
Hello?
The incident was as
Where you at?
we embarked into the next chapter of our lives.
You probably
Yeah.
inside.
Faced new challenges.
Are you watching?
We learned to be more cautious.
Hello?
I'm here.
Not you.
It can happen.
I meant the person who said something on set. If you see something
As I stepped into
near
the house, the
the
atmosphere of
thing
graduation party
that people who live here
shadow-filled my fears.
or work here want to hear. So, I'm like, what?
A friend of a friend, and I really didn't know anyone. My buddy Mark had invited me, assuring me that it was going to be a great time. He had an uncanny
Okay.
way of disappearing at gatherings like this, though, leaving me awkwardly to just navigate the landscape on my own. As I wandered through the crowd, I stumbled upon a small group of people
Vandalizing the
or dancing.
property, I see.
I thought this was a little strange since I hadn't played truth or dare since I was in middle school. But I have to say, I was intrigued, so I joined them and introduced myself. The game seemed to be the perfect icebreaker, and my turn came quickly. And I just said dare, confidently, hoping to make an impression.
Hold up.
This mischievous grin dared me to explore the abandoned house at the end of the street. Judging by her look, I thought that I was going to get dared something much more interesting, like kiss somebody or something like that. Exploring an abandoned house was not something I found objectively
That one
scary.
even more
It's
quieter
gas and glares that this house had a
than the other one.
the locals here. And I'm not one to lose space, I agreed. In a small
I think I like the quieter one.
As we approached the ominous-looking house,
You know,
could feel chills. The dark windows and overgrown yard gave the place this really
my
sinister
note
vibe.
is
It looked like every cliche abandoned horror movie you've ever seen in any movie or show. And I hesitated for a moment. The laughter and jeers from my new companions pushed me forward. We pried open the front door and stepped into the darkness. The air was stale and a layer of dust covered
Okay,
everything.
that's right then.
A flashlight illuminated
Now
the
let's do
interior
the
of
vent.
walls covered in peeling paint and the remains of once pretty elegant furniture. At first,
P. Tinkerbell.
So, I think this you cannot drink the power
beauty and history of something that had just been forgotten by time. I looked around some
of your truck.
people that came with me were terrified. One girl named Chantel was draped in
Tinkerbell. They're in Sleepyland.
just sort of followed behind me in an extremely tense fashion.
What Daddy's doing?
Part of the dare was that we had to explore
Making
the house
dinner
and stay
or
inside
go
for at
buy
least 10
dinner.
minutes, which, again, seemed like nothing.
I don't
We're
know.
going. We're going to Costco for free samples.
There's too late to do that.
Cathedral ceiling.
If you wanted to do it, step on it this one.
I went to Sam's Club
Were scattered throughout
not too long ago, and I was after free samples.
Yeah, you can get free sample every day.
I asked why everyone was so afraid of this house. One of the
I
girls
remember
No,
we went there.
They had hamburger for a free sample, so I was like,
said, "I'm not exactly sure how
okay, I'll go back and get one.
30 years or so."
Yeah, that dragon guy.
But I didn't eat lunch at that time when I went shopping at Sam's. So
Nuts about her husband.
that hamburger over there, like, okay,
And
I'm gonna
Mom
get
was like,
Just sitting in the house.
want to go get one free sample, went back and get one. Like, went 2 times. I was like, you know, you could buy it. Kept in free sample, you know?
free samples.
I must admit, I enjoyed the story, but
If you really like it,
loud when the kid told me
you get a free sample. I mean, you can
No!
buy it.
No,
Drago, what's going on?
it's time.
You can wait until me. There
Okay,
we
I'll
go.
wait.
Which one? You're not even. I mean, did you have to go help her or something?
Yeah, but I wanna.
Whatever you want.
But if I have to go help her, I gotta go help her, I guess.
Yeah.
Tartar sauce.
Alright, then go on. Make sure you like and subscribe, and
My brain tried to
you
rush.
want to do a question or you want me?
My first thought was that
Huh?
Huh?
You want to do a question on me? But I can see the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you like animals? If so, which do you prefer? To adopt or buy? I don't remember. I think I bought my two dogs while we adopt them, but I don't remember. I think we bought Ian, but yeah, might be no way. But anyway, that and the joke of the afternoon.
What did the flower say to the other flower?
What?
Stop flowering me around.
You want to do one more? It's Harry Potter. You choose.
Why did the hippogriff? Why did the hippogriff make a funny face at Harry?
Why?
Because Harry had to run to the restroom.
Alright, unicorn. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't.
Have a good afternoon, day, whatever,
Alright,
whatever it is.
and let me and Drago know what you want to see tomorrow in the comments below. I don't know. Could be Disney, could be Power, could be Sim, whichever Drago wants to see. Yeah. Do you even know what you want to see?
I don't know. I'll let you know tomorrow.
Alright, unicorn. Alright, then.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye. Alright, unicorn. Let me continue.
That somebody from the grad party had come in and was trying to play some joke on the younger guy. I told the group I saw somebody, and they became hysterical with fear, begging to go to the room. I decided to prove to everyone once and for all that ghosts and demons don't exist.
Alright, let me continue.
It was a prank. They weren't going to scare me. I approached the room and I saw the person I went into. I busted through the doorway and shouted, "Hey, I know you're in there."
It depends on
From the dark corner of the
if
room,
I can
the person ran
wait it tomorrow.
I shouted
So,
out of the way, and in that same
yeah.
instant, the closet door swung open, and two
Bye bye, bye, Disney.
I got up and looked as
Did I have that?
down the hallway, and barreled through the front door.
That's the only new game I had
My peers that remained outside.
that I could play.
I grabbed my group and we ran outside next to confirm
That's here,
the partygoers
Birdie.
were okay and unharmed.
It's you and the
From
you.
outside, we could see those figures way out in the distance, still sprinting. Our adrenaline was through the roof as we collectively tried to catch our breath from this horrific experience. I went back inside and expected the room.
Do you know what that is? Let me know in the comments.
Chips and candy. It became clear right away that these
Quite
figures
mesmerized
but just some
that
homeless folk
my peer
squatting in the house.
white
Even with
Albert or
explanation, it
something.
experiencing was scary.
It's here when I finish.
College class, and I decided to look up some information about the house. I was surprised by just how accurate the story was that the partygoers told me. A woman did not live in the house, and as far as I know, she's still locked up somewhere and still alive. To anyone who reads this stuff and hears this on Let's Read, there's no demons or evil spirits. This was the unfortunate outcome of a couple in a poor mental state whose brains were just not wired correctly, and the outcome was horrific. And these are the types of stories that tall tales are born from, and it's easy to see why. I will say some good came out of that graduation party that Mark took me to all those years ago. I started to date that Chantel person I told you
Rude,
about.
funny face.
Several months after we explored
Which
the
is
house,
not anymore.
now, after everything is said and done, we're actually engaged to be married. So, not only did this graduation party give me an exciting thrill and memory that I'll always have, it also introduced me to my future wife. Life sometimes, my friends, can be strange. Click the join
Uh,
button to become a member today.
Give me, guys.
Exclusive content. I had been a maintenance man at a local high school for years. I had seen countless students come and go, and I took pride in keeping the place clean and safe for them. Over the years, it has truly been a sight to behold to see just how many students change year after year. The fads come and go, styles change yearly, and the language they use is different, and yet the end result is always the same. One group always moves on, and a new group starts, just like clockwork. It was the night before the graduation ceremony, was tasked with setting up the gymnasium for the big event. I was honored to have such an important task, but more likely they just couldn't afford to have anyone else do the job. The school was empty and quiet as I worked, the faint hum of the air conditioning,
Jesus died.
which is how I liked it if I'm being honest. I had always found the school kind of eerie at night, but I brushed off the feeling as I focused on my task. Gradually, the gymnasium transformed into a pretty impressive venue, if I say so myself, complete with rows of chairs, a stage, and a dazzling array of decorations. It was transforming into something that even I really didn't recognize. It was hard to imagine the gym hiding underneath all those decorations, and as I was putting the finishing touches on the setup, I heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like footsteps, but I knew I was the only one in the building. I shrugged it off as my imagination playing tricks on me and continued my work. Moments later, the lights in the gymnasium flickered and went out, sending me into darkness. I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest. I started to fumble for my flashlight and scan the room. There was no one in sight. The power going out was not something that should have happened. The weather was beautiful outside and wasn't even windy.
There we go.
To refit Fort Mars.
One at a time.
Cautiously made my way to the fuse box, located in the storage room down the hall.
Take your time.
I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, or someone was there. The creak and groan of the building sent shivers down my spine, and I hurried to the storage room, eager to restore the lights and banish these shadows. During the short walk, I tried to focus on my breathing, because if I didn't, I swear I could almost hear the unearthly sounds of whispers. When I made it to the room, I flipped the breakers and the lights flickered back to life. I let out a sigh of relief and turned to leave, only to find myself face to face with a grotesque figure with a hood. I stumbled back in surprise, my heart leaping in my throat, and as I fell to the ground, the figure fled in the hallway, letting out some low groan. I had no idea what I just witnessed. While I was laying there on the floor of the supply room, I could clearly hear the sounds of multiple footprints scattering in the hallway. I jumped to my feet and shut the door. I was nearly crippled by terror as I felt that. I could hear the voices outside the door, and these voices weren't making any words, just weird freaking sounds. After a few moments of silence, I decided to open the door and just make a run for the gym. I knew the hallway would be dark, but the gym light should be on now, and I knew the light of the gym would guide me. As soon as I ripped open the door, I started to sprint down the hall. Instantly, a group of things emerged from the darkness, chasing, groaning, as if though they were in pain or
Let's
something.
do that one.
I just screamed. I was in genuine terror. When I was only a few feet away from the gym, the groans started to turn into a chuckle, which then turned into full laughter. Once I got to the gym, I finally turned to look at the figures chasing me. One of them let out some low, menacing laugh, and I realized that I was being pranked by a group of high schoolers. Angry and embarrassed, I tried to chase them off, but they just scattered in all directions, disappearing into the darkness. As I returned to the gym, I noticed that they had completely sabotaged my hard work, scattering chairs and decorations in their wake. Frustrated, I spent the rest of the night cleaning up their mess and resetting the gymnasium for the graduation ceremony. I was determined not to let their childish prank ruin the events for the students who worked so hard to reach this milestone.
Alright, now let's do
As the sun began
the
to
wall.
I finished my work, exhausted but satisfied that the gymnasium was once again ready for the ceremony.
Hold on,
Reported
unicorn.
incident to the school administration, and they promised to investigate and discipline the students responsible, but nothing seemed to come from it.
Be right back, unicorn. Okay. Oh, go over. No, no, no. Okay. Alright.
As the day went on and the ceremony
There we
began,
go.
I watched from the sidelines with a mixture of pride and some resentment. I was happy for the graduating students, but I couldn't help but feel bitter about the thoughtless prank that had turned a routine task into a night of terror. In the end, I reminded myself that the actions of a few misguided individuals shouldn't tarnish my view of the entire
Let's
student
take
body.
our time on that
I
one.
continued my work as the head of maintenance, always vigilant, but also more understanding of the unpredictable nature of high school students and their pranks. Every year, new pranks and challenges hit the internet, and unfortunately, someone in my position usually pays for them, either at my expense or I'm the one left to pick up the pieces from the messes caused by their damage. If any young people out there read this, please think about what you're doing before you do it. Luckily, I didn't sustain any injuries or damage, but not everyone is as lucky as me. It had been a long day at school, and the sun was setting as I sat in my classroom just grading papers. I was a high school history teacher, and though I loved my job, it came with its fair share of challenges. One of those challenges was a particular student, James, who was struggling to keep his grades up. He was a bright kid with potential, but his recent lack of focus was jeopardizing his chances of
Your
graduating.
work.
James was one of those kids that clearly
Man,
understood the material, but put zero effort into his work.
Only want
The previous
what?
afternoon, I spoke with James and told him that to
I
graduate,
cannot
he would
read
need
that
to
fast.
make a major effort in the last week of class. I gave the kid a chance to write an essay on any topic he wanted that we covered in the year, and that I would give him enough credit so he could graduate with his peers. He seemed unresponsive, but just sort of nodded his head. As I marked the last paper and packed up my things, I really couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around the empty classroom, but there was no one there. I dismissed the feeling as sort of a product of my tired mind and locked up the classroom before heading to my car. I thought perhaps my conversation with James had been just weighing on me. I had only been teaching for several years at this point, but I had never had to fail anyone, and I really didn't want to start now. The feeling persisted over the next couple of days. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, feeling eyes on me even when I was alone. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I began to notice things that made me question my own sanity. Little things, like finding my desk rearranged, or the sense that someone had been in my car when I knew I had locked it. Each incident really was minor, but it started to add up, creating an unnerving sense of dread that settled over me. And one evening, as I was leaving school, I noticed a figure kind of lurking in the shadows, and the figure seemed to be following me, always staying just out of sight. My heart raced as I hurried to my car, fumbling with my keys. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pursued. I tried to rationalize my fears, but the incidents just continued to escalate. I received anonymous phone calls at all hours of the night, with heavy breathing on the other end of the line. I found threatening notes slipped under my door, promising that I would pay for holding James back. I reported the incidents to the school and the police, but there was really little they could do without concrete evidence.
Okay.
The note that contained
Let's
James'
do that
name
one.
was typed and not handwritten, so they couldn't really even match the handwriting, and they suggested that I just keep a record of everything that happened and try to capture evidence if I could. I became increasingly paranoid, always looking over my shoulder and double-checking my locks. My once pleasant job now felt like a nightmare that I couldn't escape. I couldn't shake the feeling that James was the one behind it all, but I really had no proof to throw at this kid. One evening, as I was grading papers in my empty classroom, I heard a faint tapping on the window. I looked up, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw James staring at me with a twisted smile on his face. And he held up a note that read, "I'm always watching." I called police, but by the time they arrived, James was gone. They scoured the school grounds but found no trace of him. I was left with this chilling feeling of helplessness
go.
and fear. The police even suggested that I had been even making it up, asking if I had issues with the student and maybe that's why I'm singling him out. I was outraged by those accusations, but I just kept on living my life. And the stalking continued, and the line between reality and paranoia started to kind of blur. Sleep was difficult, and I felt trapped in this sort of waking nightmare. As the school year finally drew to a close, I knew that I had to find a way to put an end to this torment. The next day was the last day of classes, and I hadn't received any paper from James.
There we
I
go.
decided to make one last effort to reach him before he failed, or something much darker may have happened. I reached out to James's parents, even though I was instructed by the school not to reach out to them. I was hoping that they could intervene and help their son get back on track. I planned on telling them that it wasn't too late to get James on track to graduate, and I was willing to be flexible. To my surprise, they were unaware of the situation and were horrified by what I told them. The school nor the police reached out to James's parents. They had no idea James was potentially not graduating, and they didn't know what to say about the potential stalking situation. They promised to address the issue and get James the help that he needed. As the school year came to an end, the incidents ceased almost seemingly overnight. I never discovered the true extent of James' involvement or why he chose to target me, other than the fact that he may not be able to graduate. The experience left me with a lingering sense of dread, though, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the brightest minds. And graduation day came, and James never showed up. We tried to reach out to his parents, but the phone wasn't in service, and it turns out that James and his family had moved and just didn't tell anyone. To this day, I don't know what happened to James or where he ended up in life. I continued teaching, determined not to let one student's actions define my career. But the memory of this incident still haunts me. The reason why I'm writing this story now is that last night in the middle of the night, I received 2 very strange phone calls. And both calls were nothing on the other line. Maybe a little bit of breathing, but I wasn't too sure. Something that hasn't happened since the James incident, and I can't help but think, is he still watching me? The graduation party was in full swing, the room filled with laughter and the joyful chatter of friends and family. I stood by the bar sipping on my drink when I noticed her. She was stunning, with long dark hair and a smile that could light up the room. We made eye contact and she approached me with an air of confidence that I found captivating. We struck up a conversation and I learned that her name was Emily. She had just graduated with a degree in psychology, and we quickly found common ground in our shared love of music and film. The chemistry between us was undeniable, and as the night went on, we grew closer. Eventually, Emily suggested that we head back to her place for a little nightcap. Excited by the prospect of getting to know her better, I agreed, and we left the party hand in hand. As we arrived in her apartment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The building was old and run down, a stark contrast to the vibrant and charming woman that I had just met. I shrugged off my apprehension and followed her inside, eager to continue our conversation in a more intimate setting. Besides, sometimes, especially while in college, you can't control where you live. Emily led me into her living room, where we sat down and continued to chat. As the minutes ticked by, I began to notice something strange about her behavior. She seemed increasingly agitated, her eyes darting around the room as if though she was searching for something. Curious, I asked her if everything was all right. She hesitated for a moment, then confided in me that she had been experiencing some troubling events in her life. She explained that she had been receiving mysterious phone calls and unsettling messages from some unknown source. As she spoke, I felt a chill run down my spine. The atmosphere in the apartment had just shifted, and I could sense the fear it gripped her. She showed me some of the messages that she'd received, and my heart raced as I read the words. And despite my own fear, I felt a strong urge to protect her. I offered to stay with her for the night to provide some comfort and reassurance. You'll do all sorts of crazy things when the heart overrides the brain's logic.
Hold on.
She hesitated, then agreed, a lot of relief crossing her face. As the night wore on, we heard strange noises coming from the other rooms. Footsteps, creaking doors, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Each sound sent shivers down our spines, and we clung to each other for comfort. As crazy as it may seem, it sounded like someone was literally in the room next to ours. In the early hours of the morning, as the noises grew louder and more frequent, I decided to finally investigate. I crept through the dark apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the hallway, I noticed a door that had been left slightly ajar.
Unhappy.
I pushed it open, revealing a room that looked like it had been almost ransacked. The walls were covered in paint and holes, and a collection of objects and trinkets lay scattered across the floor. The horrifying truth began to sink in. Emily may be in serious trouble. As I turned to confront her, she stood in the doorway, and her eyes were filled with fear. She admitted that she had not been entirely honest with me. I tried to ask her what exactly was going on, but she seemed distant and confused and even angry. I heard the door to Emily's apartment open, and the sound of a bigger person could be heard barreling down the hall. As I stood there, helpless, watching and listening to this all unfold, I looked up and noticed Emily, who now looked even more visibly upset. She looked up at me and mouthed the words, "I'm so sorry." Before I knew it, the person of the strange and terrorizing noises made himself known. It was a large, bald man with a huge red beard. He greeted Emily with a disgraceful insult and started asking her questions about things like, "Did you accomplish your task yet?" When Emily didn't answer right away, the man seemed to become irate and turned his attention away from me and looked his eyes on Emily. I knew that was my only moment to act in this weird situation. I grabbed some wooden debris that was on the ground and hit the man over the head, which was hard enough to knock the man over and keep him dazed for a minute. Emily screamed. She told me to run, so I did. I then realized that the horrifying truth was not that Emily was some sort of monster, but she appeared to be a victim, trapped in some cycle of fear and manipulation. As I reached the door, I told Emily to come with me, and in some moment of heroism, she agreed and left that man moaning in pain on the ground. In the days and weeks that followed, we faced numerous challenges as we worked to sever Emily's ties with this dysfunctional man, and I learned a lot about Emily and the many horrible things she and this man would do to people like me. He would use Emily to lure men into this rundown apartment, and then jump them and rob them. Emily wasn't a grad student like she claimed at the grad party, and she dropped out a couple of years ago due to this guy. Emily just re-enrolled in school and is excited to start her future free of this monster. Even though this was the most terrifying night of my entire life, I'm thankful that it happened. As a result of this graduation party, I met Emily, and together we brought that red-bearded monster to justice. But through it all, we grew closer, and our bond forged in this crucible of fear.
With
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. I'd love to see you there. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit r/letsreadofficial, or send it over email at letsreadsubmissions@gmail.com, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button over here on YouTube that gives you all the crazy perks that you can check out for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories and big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, thanks for being a friend. Hey friends, today's episode is brought to you by the folks over at Dave. It's the start of a brand new year, which means you might want to start things off on the right foot. You might be considering budget revisions or maybe tackling that looming debt, but you can't always plan for the unexpected. And that's where Dave can help you. Dave is the banking app helping their customers build a better financial future. They can get you up to $500 instantly with their extra cash feature, and you don't even need to bank with Dave to get it. All you gotta do is link your normal bank account to get your extra cash account. Just head over to dave.com/letsread and sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. There tends to be a small fee for using these types of services, and there are no credit checks or late fees, and no interest is charged on the instant extra cash you use. All you need is a phone and an email, and you're good to go. Dave is open, honest, and straightforward, and puts its members' financial interests first. So, if you're in need of some extra cash going into 2023, head over to dave.com/letsread and sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. And now, without further ado, on with today's stories.
I'm not kidding.
Central New Mexico is home to a small town with a rather unusual name. Originally called Hot Springs, the town changed its name in 1950 after a popular radio host announced that he would air the show's 10th anniversary episode from the first town that named itself after his radio show. So, on March 31st of 1950, Hot Springs officially changed its name to Truth or Consequences, and the program's 10th anniversary show was held there the following night. Truth or Consequences, or TRC as it's sometimes called, was home to only 4,700 citizens back then, and the population hasn't exactly ballooned since, but as of 1970, the population has been steadily on the rise. However, between the years of 2000 and 2010, the town saw its first population decline in more than 40 years, with almost 1,000 people picking up sticks and moving elsewhere. So what could be to blame for such a drastic drop in the population?
I know it.
Well, it might have something to do with a man named David Parker Ray. Born on November 6th of 1939 in Belen, New Mexico, David and his older sister Peggy grew up in the care of their paternal grandfather. Their father was a drunk, and a violent one at that, often visiting the children while under the influence of alcohol. David recalled a time when his father gave him the gift of an adult magazine depicting violent imagery. Naturally, David yearned for the presence of his absent father, and given that the magazine was one of the few gifts his father ever gave him, he cherished it. The impressionable young boy became fascinated with these images, and just like any male child of his age, he wanted to be just like his dad. The introduction of such concepts to David's psychology were devastating to his social development, as he found it impossible to communicate the ideas in his head with his peers who attended the nearby Mountain Air High School. The social awkwardness led to David being bullied by a handful of his fellow students, something which further compounded his deep-rooted personal problems. Following his high school graduation, David enlisted in the U.S. Army and worked as a general mechanic in motor pool before later receiving an honorable discharge. During this time, David was married and divorced 4 times, and although it's not clear why each of these divorces occurred, it's quite evident that he had a great deal of difficulty maintaining romantic relationships. In the months that followed his final and perhaps messiest divorce, David Parker Ray had something of a midlife crisis and spent more than $100,000 on a special project he would come to call the Toy Box. The Toy Box was a modified semi-truck trailer with a plain white exterior, but inside, it was anything but plain. Ray had spent a huge chunk of that $100,000 on completely soundproofing the trailer, as well as making the thing almost impenetrable and inescapable. He then spent another sizable amount on an old gynecologist chair, the kind used by special doctors to determine the well-being and health of a woman's reproductive organs. The chair comes complete with leg supports, additions which David modified to be more like leg restraints. On one wall of the trailer, David mounted a tool rack adorning it with a variety of whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, surgical blades, saws, and even manacles designed to keep a person's legs spread. David has also outfitted the trailer with a number of torture devices, including a portable generator he used for electroshock torture and detailed diagrams showing methods and techniques for inflicting the maximum amount of pain. Yet even in light of such a disturbing collection of toys and tools, perhaps the most disturbing thing about the toy box is the fact that David had basically turned the entire ceiling into one giant mirror. Not only did he want to torture and violate his victims for hours on end, he wanted them to be able to watch it happening. From 1957 to 1999, David Parker Ray is said to have kidnapped, tortured, and killed up to 60 different women and girls, with almost all of them being residents of New Mexico's Sierra County. The things he did to them are frankly unspeakable, and it's suspected that many of his victims simply passed away as a result of the brutal torture, long before Ray had any intention of killing them. He confessed to setting dogs on his victims, drugging them with cocktails of sedatives and hallucinogens to exacerbate their terror before he subjected them to days of pain and violation. When he became bored with his prey, David would inject his victims with a combination of sodium pentothal and phenobarbital, an amnesic cocktail designed to basically wipe their memories.
There we go.
And then he'd drive them out into the desert,
Garage.
kick them out of his car, then move on to planning his next abduction. According to David, he did this over and over again, using a simple but effective modus operandi of either visiting a nearby bar to spike his victims' drinks, or impersonating a police officer in order to place them under false arrest. This worked time and time again, and if his confession is to be believed, David Parker Ray is probably the most prolific serial offender in the history of the United States. But his reign of terror came crashing down when he came across one victim who'd proved much more resilient than most others. Her name is Cynthia Vigil Aramilio. In March of 1999, Cynthia was approached by David in the parking lot of the Blue Water Saloon in the nearby town of Elephant Butte. Now, I'm not casting any aspersions on Cynthia or the choices of her past, but it's a good chance that she said yes when David asked if she'd sleep with him for money, as she didn't struggle or complain when he announced that he was an undercover police officer and that she was under arrest for the solicitation of being an escort. And David then placed Cynthia in the back of his car, where she must have assumed he was about to drive her to a nearby police precinct, so we can only imagine her horror when she realized she was being taken to Truth or Consequences and the toy box that lay hidden in plain sight. If Cynthia didn't start to resist when she saw the trailer, she most certainly freaked out once she laid her eyes on the horrors inside it. Then, either using some kind of sedative or by using brute force, Ray knocked Cynthia out, and then got to work restraining her in the modified gynecologist chair. When Cynthia woke up, she heard the sound of a tape recorder playing a pre-recorded message.
This one help.
It was the voice of David Parker Ray. "Hello there," the tape said. "Are you comfortable right now?" "I doubt it. Wrists and ankles chained, gagged, blindfolded, disoriented and scared too, I would imagine. Perfectly normal under the circumstances. But for a little while at least, you need to get yourself together and listen to this tape. I'm going to tell you in detail why you've been kidnapped and what's going to happen to you and how long you'll be here. I don't know the exact details of your capture," he continued, "because this tape is being created in July 23rd of 1993 as a general advisory tape for future female captives, but it's based on my experience dealing with captives over a period of several years. Now, you are obviously here against your will and you're either very scared or very angry. I'm sure that you've already tried to get your wrists and ankles loose, but you can't, because you've been snatched and brought here for us to train and use you as a slave. Sounds kind of far out, right? And I suppose it is to the uninitiated, but we do it all the time. It's going to take a lot of adjustment on your part, and you're not going to like it. But I don't care about that. You're going to be kept chained up like an animal and used until such time as we see fit. Me and my lady friend are
Like,
very
what
selective when we snatch a girl to use for
give
these
me would
purposes.
like
It goes
the
without saying that you have a
tea.
fine body and you're young.
more.
The lady friend David was referring to
So
here was
that
named Cindy Hendy,
Me and
and later
Drago
received a sentence of 36
could
years
make
for
a
her role in the toy
decision
box
on
torture.
which one
Hendy
to
would often
dream
act as a
more.
kind of scout, singling
Like,
out
I
vulnerable young
talked
women
him
who might
at
not be easily missed. She also
not
participated in the
night
torture from time to time, but was
on
nowhere near as
which one do
sadistic
you
as
want
David Parker
tea?
Ray. Here, David explained to his
Like,
captives, your status is no more than of one of the dogs,
I mean,
or of one of the animals out in the barn. The tape continued.
I
And
do
like the rest
you
of our
want
animals, you will be fed and watered and kept reasonably clean.
so
We take 4 or 5 different girls each year, depending on our
you
urges.
want you guys want
We're always looking.
what
Occasionally,
the
some
most?
sweet little thing will be broke down on the
It's
side of the
been a
road,
comment.
walking, bicycling, jogging. Anytime an
Um,
opportunity like that presents itself and it's not too risky, we'll grab her, even if
Yeah,
we've already got a captive in the playroom.
so that me and
After
Dragon can
Variety
think
is
about
the
it at
spice
night.
of life. Although you're going to be a lot of fun to play with,
I
I will
can
get tired of you
help
eventually,
us
but
do
if I killed every girl we kidnapped, there'd be bodies
so
strung
that
all
we
over the
won't have
country.
to
I don't like
the
killing a
thing
girl unless it is absolutely necessary. So
about
I've
when
devised
we
a safe,
do
alternative method of
the
disposal.
dream.
After we get completely through with you,
Um,
you're going to be drugged up real heavy with a combination of
don't
sodium
worry about the
pentothal
pogo.
and phenobarbital,
About
both
work on
hypnotic
that
drugs that will
tomorrow.
make you extremely susceptible to
I don't know if
hypnosis,
it's gonna work.
auto-hypnosis, and hypnotic
But-
suggestion. After that, you're going to be kept drugged a couple of days
Maybe I'll make
while I
another
play with your mind.
pogo
By the
account.
time I get through
No.
brainwashing you, you're not going to
I
remember a
probably
thing about
think
this
it
little
too.
adventure.
Remind act.
You won't remember this place, us, or what has happened to you. And there won't be any DNA evidence because you'll be bathed.
I don't know yet.
After that, you'll be dressed, sedated, and turned loose on some country road. Bruised, sore all over, but
So,
nothing that won't heal up in a week or two. The
don't
thought of being
hold up
brainwashed may not be
on.
appealing to you, but we've been doing it a long
go
time, and it
good.
works. And it's the lesser of two
wanna
evils.
See
I'm
if
sure
I
that you would
wanna
prefer that in lieu of
make
being
another
strangled or having
account.
your throat cut.
For that one?
Just when you think the tape can't get any
Yeah.
more disturbing, David begins to
I
lecture
don't
his
know.
captive on the improbability of them
I
being
mean,
rescued.
I like pogo good.
Undoubtedly, somebody's
got
going to be looking for
boy,
you. There might even
but
be a missing persons report,
Roblox got
he
bone
says before
also.
stating. But nobody's going to be looking for you here. There are not going to be any knights in shining armor coming to rescue you. You are strictly on your own. And I bet that's a very scary
Yeah,
thought.
just let me know in the
As for escaping, I'm
comment.
sure you'll try to figure out a way. That's human nature.
like help me and Drago
Consequently,
out.
you are going to be
On-
kept in an environment more secure than a prison
What?
cell. A steel collar is going
you
to be
know,
padlocked around your
Will
neck.
you want to see on
It is a long, heavy chain that is
on our
padlocked to a ring in
channel?
the floor.
I
The
shared
collar will
with
never
them
be
kid.
removed until you are turned loose.
You don't have a
It's a
computer.
permanent fixture.
No, not you
As
want
I've already
to.
said, you'll be fed and watered on a regular basis. Not
So
much,
that
but
if you
enough to
want
keep
to
you
make
healthy.
a
During the first
YouTube
few
account
days,
later,
until you adjust to it, you're going to feel weak and you'll be hungry all the time.
I don't know when.
But I prefer to keep you in a weakened condition
like
anyway.
I could take a break
I
sometime.
realize that being abducted and forced into
You
slavery
know,
is a hard pill to swallow.
That probably in the
Some girls really have a
future.
lot of trouble with that,
But
and I'm
not
sure
now.
you will too.
good.
But face it, you can't get
Yeah.
away. You can't say
Um,
no. You won't be able to struggle or resist. A scary thought? Yes, but you simply have no
We're
other choice but
almost
to take it.
Dawn.
There's not many rules, and they're very easy to remember, but you're still gonna make mistakes. Every slave does.
099.
But I don't like repeat
Okay.
offenders. It gets me very upset. Some girls tend to be a little rebellious, and I sure wouldn't advise that, because it will get you in
There was
serious
one.
trouble. If necessary, I'm capable of doing
Ben.
things to your body and torturing you in ways that you can't even imagine.
Um,
The playroom is equipped with a full set of
yeah,
surgical
just let me
instruments
and
which
Dragon
I have
know.
had occasion to use and will again
Oh,
as necessary.
Yeah,
If you bite me, I'll pull your teeth out with pliers. If you scratch me, I'll pull your nails out. It may sound harsh and cold, but if you give us too much trouble, or if you pose any kind of threat to us, I won't have any qualms about slicing your throat. Towards the end of the tape,
Echo.
David seems to have taken
Ah.
on a sickeningly reassuring and perhaps supportive tone, urging his prisoner
Alright,
to survive.
Unicorn.
Be
Make
nice.
sure you like
Keep your
and
mouth shut.
subscribe.
Learn the rules
And let me
survive,
know on
he says.
tomorrow
No matter how painful it is,
on
nothing
what
that we
game you
plan to
want
do to your
see.
body will cause any serious or permanent damage.
Drago Barry
I'm not
with
lying to
Big
you or
Bird.
trying to make it sound easier because that would be
Between
pointless. I'm just telling
your
you like
pig
it is.
and dragon
As
pig.
far as needles go, they'll always be
Um,
sterilized. The clamps are
you
gonna
can
hurt,
shoot
but that won't
heal
cause any
one.
permanent injury.
I don't know.
They don't even break the skin. David then finishes with, just take it day by day. Be smart
Yeah.
and be a
I can
survivor.
let
Don't ever
dragon
scream.
pig.
Don't talk without permission.
I can
Be very
speak
quiet,
sometimes,
Be
but
docile and obedient, and
normally
by all means,
just
show proper
pick
respect.
wherever he pick.
Have a nice day. We can only imagine how utterly terrified Cynthia would have been, having been forced to listen to such a thing, and for just the 72 hours that followed, she was subjected to some of the most nightmarish physical and psychological torture imaginable. On the third day of her captivity, David had to spend the day at work, so he left Cynthia in the care of his accomplice, Cindy Hendy. At some point, Cindy walked into another room of the trailer to answer a phone call, leaving her prisoner temporarily unsupervised. By that point, Hendy was getting far too comfortable with Cynthia's obedience, and in a white-hot moment of realization, Cynthia noticed that her captor had left the keys to her chains on a nearby table, just within her reach. She reached for them, lifting the keys from the table as quietly as possible before attempting to free herself. But right as Cynthia was making her escape attempt, Cindy Hendy walked back into the room, flying into a rage when she saw what was happening. A vicious struggle ensued, with the two women scratching and biting each other as chains rattled and the trailer rocked. Cindy managed to fight her way out of Cynthia's grip for a moment, grabbing a nearby lamp before smashing it over Cynthia's head. The captive woman was dazed and bloodied, but in the brief reprieve, she too had managed to grab a weapon, and when Cindy lunged at her again, Cynthia plunged an ice pick into her captor's neck. Cindy collapsed to the floor, gurgling as blood leaked into her airway, but Cynthia didn't hesitate. She unlocked her chains, took the padlocks off the door to the toy box, then hurtled towards the nearest highway wearing nothing but that steel slave collar that David had forced on her. Cynthia soon arrived at the home of a good Samaritan who took her in, called the cops, then consoled her while they waited for them to arrive. It was the end of a 3-day nightmare, one she'd never fully recover from, but thankfully, her valiant escape signaled the end of David's decades-long rampage. The police used Cynthia's testimony to swiftly track down the location of the toy box and took both David and Cindy into custody. They were detained, questioned, and charged, but in the course of the police investigation, a shocking web of familial collusion was discovered. David Parker Ray had actually videotaped the torture of some of his victims, compiling a chilling library of homemade horror films. They were supposed to be for posterity, but they ended up being used as evidence against him. One of the girls on a videotape from 1996 was found to be named Kelly Garrett, who police managed to track down thanks to the tattoo on her ankle. Kelly then told police that on the night she'd been abducted, she had a fight with her husband and decided to go out drinking with friends. One of these friends was named Jessie, and Jessie just so happened to be the daughter of David Parker Ray. Not only was Jessie the daughter of David, she was also his accomplice, and she later admitted to deliberately taking Kelly to the Blue Water Saloon, her father's favorite hunting grounds. While they were there, Jessie drugged Kelly's drink with intoxicants provided by her father, and as Kelly staggered outside feeling nauseous and woozy, she was rendered unconscious by a blow from behind. After days of torture, Kelly only escaped because David believed he'd crossed the line and tortured his victim to death. However, upon noticing that she was still breathing, he slashed her throat, then dumped her body unceremoniously at the side of the road. He was later amazed to find out that she had survived the ordeal, but was surprised it hadn't made the news. This was because, to put it bluntly, no one believed Kelly's story. Her husband accused her of cheating on him and filed for a divorce, while local police seemed to put it down to a lover's quarrel and failed to properly investigate the incident. David Parker Ray's trial was a long and tumultuous affair,
let's
but in
see.
2001, he accepted a plea deal to serve 224 years in prison for the abduction and torture of 3 young women,
The
Cynthia
wall
and
bag.
Kelly being 2 of them. And then, on May 28, 2002, David was taken to the Lea County Correctional Facility in Hobbs, New Mexico, to be questioned by state police concerning his involvement in a number of other crimes. He died of a heart attack before the interrogation took place, collapsing in front of correctional officers, never to arise again. Ray's daughter, Jessie Ray, also was tried on charges of kidnapping and was eventually sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and was released sometime in the mid-2000s. Cindy Hendy, on the other hand, after becoming eligible for parole in 2017, was eventually released in 2019. This is the same woman who gladly smashed a lamp over another person's head simply because they dared to be free of her tyrannical sadism. And now, she's free to walk the streets, the same streets that are walked by those she chose to victimize.
There, on them.
What I'm about to tell you is the darkest secret I know. I'm from a little town in the Midwest, and in that town is a cute little chapel. In the back of that cutesy little
Get the
chapel, there's a
power.
small memorial to a family of 4,
Stop
murdered
when
by
I
mysterious
go in
transients who
here.
were never caught. They were all home one night when this guy broke in. Then he killed the entire family while they slept. Mom, dad, son, and daughter, all dead within just a few minutes of each other. As you can probably guess, the murders absolutely devastated our small town. I was only in elementary school when it happened, but I can still remember the vigil, the funeral, and the ceremony that surrounded the unveiling of the chapel's memorial. It was a completely random, avoidable tragedy, an act of malice perpetrated on us by some shadowy outside evil. Only, that's not what actually happened. What really happened is like an open secret, something we all know but no one ever says out loud. It's like that because we need to protect our community. At least, that's what I was told, but I'm not sure how lying about it actually helps us. It's just a veneer, a phony facade of small-town tranquility. What's the point of pretending we're a quiet, happy town when the reality is far from it? Okay, I guess I've been blue-balling you all over what actually happened, so I'll just get right to it. On the night in question, the family had dinner, watched some TV, then at some point after 9 p.m., the parents put their kids to bed. The dad usually stayed up with a glass of scotch after mom and the kids went to bed. He'd watch football or baseball highlights, binge a few late-night shows, you know, typical dad stuff. But he never got up off the couch that night. The whole cover story was that the family had been killed while they slept, and technically that's true, but it's always painted like they were all sleeping peacefully in their beds when they were killed. But that's not true. A few hours before they were murdered, the family had sat down to dinner. I don't know what they ate exactly, chicken pot pie or whatever, but I know what they had for dessert because that day, the 9-year-old daughter of the family had made everyone some of that strawberry cream-flavored Jell-O pudding. The way I imagined it, it probably wasn't the nicest dessert they'd ever had. But geez, if my kid appeared to show a passion for cooking, baking, really anything, I'd feign enthusiasm and clear my plate. Who cares if they got the powder to milk ratio off by a little or used a whole bunch of extra sugar when there's already a ton in there? Only, the reason it tasted off is because the 9-year-old girl had poured in a ton of NyQuil Max Strength into the pudding mix. I don't know exactly how much she put in there or how much the parents and brother actually ate, but but it was enough to pretty much knock them out so the daughter could put her little plan of hers into action. You see, the reason why they never caught the mysterious transient hobo murderer that chose to randomly break in and murder the family is because there never was one. After her family were all passed out, the little girl went into the kitchen and took a big old knife out of a drawer or a block. She then walked into the TV room where her dad was asleep on the couch and cut his throat. From what I was told, she cut his throat so deep and wide that he couldn't scream. All he could do was put his hands to the wound, wonder why. But he would have been dead in mere minutes. After that, she went upstairs and did the same to her mother and brother, just opened them up right there in their beds. This all happened on a Friday night, by the way, and no one even suspected anything had happened until Sunday morning when none of the family showed up to church. But even then, they might have their reasons not to attend. Could have been out of town visiting family, maybe a spur-of-the-moment vacation. Besides, this is the kind of town where everyone knows each other's business, but they also know well enough to stay out of each other's business, if that makes any sense. The point is, no one visited this family's house until Monday afternoon, like 50-something hours after the murders had occurred. The kids hadn't shown up at school, the parents hadn't shown up at their jobs, and from what I understand, the cops basically spent the morning piecing together until they realized the whole family was missing. Obviously, the first place to check out was the house itself, so a couple of sheriff's deputies rolled up to check in on them. What they found is pretty hotly disputed among our town's residents, and depending on who you talk to about it, one of three things happened.
If I went
The first scenario is that the 9-year-old daughter had taken their own life after the gravity of what she did set in. After that, the whole thing was covered up just to avoid all the painful media attention a case like that might get. That's the simplest explanation, and I know Occam's razor.
If you guys, like I said, guys want to see this again, let me know in the comments below. And yeah, thank you for watching Unicorn. Bye guys.